أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Let me first apologize that we are running 15 minutes late. Some of our panelists have not arrived as yet. I will do the welcome, inshallah, immediately after we've made the dua and we've had Nasreen Ismail to recite from the Holy Quran. I'm going to call upon Sheikh Sulaiman Benjamin, the principal of the Girls Institute, to come and make a dua for us, inshallah, so that this proceeding may be blessed today.
الفاتحة. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين سيدنا ونبينا ومولانا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم. اللهم افتح علينا بالقرآن العظيم واجعله لنا إماما ونورا يسعى بين أيدينا يوم الدين. اللهم زدنا علما وارزقنا فهما واغفر لنا ذنوبنا وذنوب والدينا ومشايخنا ولجميع المؤمنين أجمعين. ربنا يسر ولا تعسر، ربنا تمم بالخير وأنت الكريم الميسر. اللهم نور قلوبنا بنور القرآن وزين أخلاقنا بزينة القرآن. اللهم اجعل القرآن لنا في الدنيا قرينا وفي القبر مؤنسا. اللهم حبب إلينا الإيمان وزينه في قلوبنا وكره إلينا الكفر والفسوق والعصيان. واجعلنا يا الله من الراشدين، واجعلنا يا الله من المتقين، واجعلنا يا الله من عبادك الصالحين. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار وأدخلنا الجنة مع الأبرار يا عزيز يا غفار يا رب العالمين. قال الله تعالى في شأن حبيبه: إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وأصحابه وبارك وسلم. بفضلك دعواهم فيها سبحانك اللهم وتحيتهم فيها سلام وآخر دعواهم أن الحمد لله رب العالمين.
Shukran, Sheikh Sulaiman. We will immediately go into the recitation from the Holy Quran, and we'll call upon one of our graduates, Nasreen Ismail, to recite for us, inshallah.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله ولتنظر نفس ما قدمت لغد واتقوا الله إن الله خبير بما تعملون. ولا تكونوا كالذين نسوا الله فأنساهم أنفسهم أولئك هم الفاسقون. لا يستوي أصحاب النار وأصحاب الجنة أصحاب الجنة هم الفائزون. لو أنزلنا هذا القرآن على جبل لرأيته خاشعا متصدعا من خشية الله وتلك الأمثال نضربها للناس لعلهم يتفكرون هو الله الذي لا إله إلا هو عالم الغيب والشهادة هو الرحمن الرحيم هو الله الذي لا إله إلا هو الملك القدوس السلام المؤمن المهيمن العزيز الجبار المتكبر سبحان الله عما يشركون هو الله الخالق البارئ المصور له الأسماء الحسنى يسبح له ما في السماوات والأرض وهو العزيز الحكيم صدق الله العظيم.
Shukran, Nasreen. Nasreen is one of the special treasures within our organization. She's probably the youngest graduate in Jamiatul Qurra, and I believe that she's a special Hafidha. Esteemed religious leaders, scholars of the Quran and Hufad, and amongst whom we have here today Maulana Iksan Hendricks, the panelists that we have here as guests today. We have Senior Counsel Abu Bakr Muhammad, we have Mustaq Bray, we have Hussein Kajikar, we have Nazima Ahmed, and Sadullah Khan has not arrived as yet, but he's on the panel. To the collective group of leaders in our community and in our organizations, in their respective fields, to members of the board of Jamiatul Qurra and the broader fraternity of Jamiatul Qurra, to other special and honored guests, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to extend a warm welcome to our Strategic Leadership Forum. We've lost some time today, and I'm going to not belabor the proceedings, but I'm immediately going to introduce our first speaker. He is the president of the Muslim Judicial Council. He is a graduate from Lucknow University in India in the Faculty of Sharia. He's also a student of the late scholar and luminary Sheikh Abul Hassan Al-Nadwi, and hence is a member of the Natwatul Ulama. We all know Sheikh Iksan's passion for the Palestinian struggle, and hence is the director of the Al-Quds Foundation in South Africa. He's South Africa's representative at the International Union of Muslim Scholars, headed by the world-renowned scholar Sheikh Yusuf Al-Qaradawi. Maulana is also a trustee on the trust board of the Holy Quran International Memorization Organization, headed by Dr. Abdullah Ali Basfar. Maulana, by virtue of his presidency of the MJC and the many organizations that he belongs to internationally, he has become an ambassador for the Muslims of South Africa. He's also carved a special niche for himself by his work, and he's also then an ambassador of Quranic scholarship. I immediately call upon Maulana Ihsan to address us, please.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والعاقبة للمتقين ولا عدوان إلا على الظالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. Your Excellencies, respected ulama, senior leadership of the Jama'iyyatul Qurra, members of the Imara of the Muslim Judicial Council, the board of Jama'iyyatul Qurra, our brothers and sisters, Jama'atul Muslimin, all praise and thanks be to the Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Salawat and salam upon Sayyidina Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. Allow me in my opening remarks to pay tribute to Al-Marhum Sheikh Yusuf Buli rahmatullahi alayhi. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless him with the highest place in Jannah, insha'Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala. There was a sense of anxiety leading up to this occasion here this morning. And the anxiety was about the fact that we needed to make sure that we are part of this very important occasion here today. And when Brother Sharif Abbas and Dr. Ismet said that I only have 20 minutes, more anxiety built up, because there is such a great excitement to share so many things, but I will give you the guarantee I will not behave like a traditional sheikh today. I'll try to stick to the time. And His Excellency Hafiz Abu Bakr has come all the way from Durban to honor us in the legacy of people who have memorized, studied the Quran, and continues to show the excellence of the character of Quranic learning. And some or the other how my eyes fell on the date 1969, and I forgot about this grand speech that I had in my mind. And 1969 is a very historical year. The Jam'iyyatul Qurra and whoever deliberated and decided to establish the Jam'iyyatul Qurra in 1969 is exactly almost 300 years after the wafat of Shaykhul Islam Tuan Yusuf, Sheikh Yusuf. In fact, if one accurately checks the date, Tuan Yusuf arrived 1664 and passed away on the 21st of May, 1669. Farahmatullahi alayhi. And so, Jam'iyyatul Qurra seems then to be the culmination of a period between 1652 to 1669. And let me analyze it quickly. 1652, for us now, can be in one way recalled as the worst date in the history of South African colonialism, apartheid, and whatever it may be. The arrival of Jan van Riebeeck. But I'm not going to talk about Jan van Riebeeck, 652. But there are clear research that prove there was a few individual Muslims who did arrive with Jan van Riebeeck. Very little is known of their names and what type of profiles they had. But between 1652, 1654, 1658, moving on to the period of 1669 to the wafat of Sheikh Yusuf, 3 sets of people arrived. Of course, those who arrived in 1652, shortly after that, the Malay terminology for the second batch of people that arrived under the Dutch colonialists were referred to as the Maradeka slaves, those who enjoyed a little bit more freedom. The term in Malay, Maradeka, means freedom. You go to Kuala Lumpur and you go to Maradeka Square, Freedom Square. But shortly after that, the group that arrived were referred to in the Malay terminology as the Orang Kayang. And the Orang Kayang are referred to people who had a strong political profile wherever they were brought from the Indonesian, Malaysian archipelago, from Java and those villages or islands. They had a very high political profile. But very significantly amongst the group of the Orang Kayas, of course, Said Abdurrahman Matara and these great mashaikh who arrived here. And I don't like to start at the point of referring to the karamat as the grave, because the karamat was in their performance prior to their demise, their intellectual ability, their political profile, the manner in which they strategically positioned themselves for what Islam and the Muslims could enjoy in the future is the karamat of the awliya that must be celebrated. That is the intellectual capacity, their vision, their foresight for this country, their contribution, that which is called in Arabic al-mawqif al-ijabi, the very positive position that they position themselves mahma at-tahaddiyat wal-mashakil, in spite of the difficulties and the challenges at hand. A man by the name of Raja, referred to as the Raja of Tambora, and this is my point of focus. The Raja of Tambora is referred to as part of the Orang Kayang, who was Hafidhul Quran. And by then already, Tuan Yusuf, rahmatullahi alayh, appealed to the Dutch at the Cape not to be so harsh and hard with the Raja of Tambora, because he was a Hafiz of the Quran. Look at the vision of Tuan Yusuf. The Dutch respected that, and they responded to the concerns of Tuan Yusuf, but what they did was, they exiled the Raja of Tambora to a farm in the Stellenbosch area known as Vergelegen. And on the farm of Vergelegen, the Raja of Tambora wrote the Quran from memory around about 1667. And the evidence are clear in research that Quran was given to the governor Simon van der Stel in 1667. The only problem that we have is there is no evidence of what happened to that Quran after it was given to Simon van der Stel. The point here is, this is visionary. This is a deep vision for the Ummah. The Raja of Tambora, the Karama of the Raja of Tambora understood, if this is the colonial master, the ruler of the time, the best that I can give him to begin to prick his intellectual mind is the greatest book on the face of earth, Al-Quran. So we have to see the act of the Raja of Tambora as risalatun azimatun lil-Islam. It is a great visionary message that came from the Raja of Tambora. There are some evidence, and in fact, I recall on one occasion Maulana Yusuf Karan did mention it. He said, there are some evidence that shows some of the grandchildren of Simon van der Stel did become Muslim. And I think it will be good for us to continue to research. My point is, between 1652 1669, that period was a crucial period for the survival, the preservation of the identity of Muslims in this country, Cape the Good Hope, the city, and then the rest of the country, South Africa. And I think we cannot ignore that the Quran stands out as shaping the identity of Muslim citizenship in this country. And so we need to move away from the idea that it was just Muslims who arrived from the Indonesian, Malaysian archipelago. We have to shift a little bit from the idea it was just the reference of Muslims who arrived from the subcontinent of India and Bangladesh in these areas, but very much we need to trace possibly the indigenous people of this country who opened their hearts at a very early stage to the message of the Quran and Islam. And not enough research has been done in that particular area. But the Quran continues to stand out, and one cannot deny our history and the arrival of the great Imam Abdullah bin Qadi Abdus Salam Tuangguru, the Imam of the Awal Mosque in Dope Street, brings about this great achievement, miraculously incarcerated Robben Island, 14 years. In that particular environment of Robben Island in 1700 and something leading up to the 1800s, 3 Qur'ans from memory. The one I have clear proof about, and this is the one that recently stirred some controversy in the community. And that was by virtue of the fact that we decided to preserve that Quran because there were attempts to steal that Quran. And so the best was to take an initiative to have the Quran leather bounded, to have it in a very secured space in the Awal Masjid. And when that secured space has been secured with all the security features, then of course we should bring the Quran back into the masjid. That Quran does not belong to a family. That Quran belongs to Islam. That Quran belongs to the Ummah. That Quran is the book of Allah. It is not the inheritance of a particular family. But we celebrate, and we continue to celebrate this momentous development of the tahfiz of Quran, and the cobbled streets of the Bukab bears testimony to the fact of how the buqa became the center for tahfiz of the Quran, the homes of the mashayikh, the homes of the mashayikh. Before we built these very beautiful institutions, it was the homes of the mashayikh, the space of the front room, with the wife cooking in the kitchen and the children memorizing the Quran. And we have people who can clearly share the story much better than myself. I'm not a hafiz of the Quran, and so I will never venture. But the one thing, small little thing I had as a dream, my late father was born in the buqa, in a Christian family. He was influenced to accept Islam at the age of 12. He died last year at the age of 83. He said, my son, I spent the better part of my life as a Muslim. But long before he passed on, the day when my elder son was born, he said, for the gratitude that I have for the environment that the Muslims displayed in the buqa. He made particular reference to the Sukkah family because it was the Sukkah family and the Hendricks family that lived in the same house. But it was the Quran that influenced so many. And I'm sorry that I just mentioned my father. There are many, but I can speak the best of the most personal example. He said, your son, not by virtue of your choice, by virtue of my instruction, must become a hafiz of the Quran. And therefore, I will never ever forget Sheikh Yusuf Buli, rahmatullahi alayh. And so, I'm sorry, the Quran plays a role beyond what sometimes we think. If we connect it only to the expansion of buildings and the budget requirements, then we are going to lose the very impact that the Quran had. But of course, institutionalization is important today. Budgets are important. We need deen, but we need money also. We need good business people who understand what is istithmar, what is investment, who can grow wealth. A sheikh, a maulana, an imam who has not been trained to manage wealth cannot do that. It is best for him to teach. And so those who have the expertise will fulfill those type of requirements and demands in the Muslim community. And so if we continue to examine the impact of the Quran and the journey from the house of the sheikh to the culmination, and when I refer to Jam'iyatul Qurra, let me rather say it here, I do not refer to it as to the exclusive nature of membership, because Jam'iyatul Qurra is the culmination of all those who contributed to the Quran prior to 1969, and Jam'iyatul Qurra should continue to play this very leading role. And my appeal today is, from here we need to move to the Academy of Leadership. There is an absolute bankruptcy of leadership. I don't stand here today as a leader, a big chancer. But I hope that inshallah, by virtue of some of our enthusiasm that we have to serve this community, it can be part of the extension of a foundation that in the very near future there will be an academy of leadership that will come from the Jam'iyatul Qurra. And I conclude because we are 2 minutes, mashallah. Besides producing good huffaz, we must be in the business of producing good citizens for this country. This country is our country. We cannot be spectators and watch corruption, the political crossroads, And all these things unfold in front of us as though we are visitors. We are not visitors. So the best that we can do is that we have to continue to shape good citizens. And if Jam'iyatul Qurra and the Quran, as we have illustrated from the time of the Raja of Tambora, Tuanguru, and of course the establishment of Jam'iyatul Qurra, and every single Hafiz teacher, Rahmatullahi alayhim jami'an, on the day of judgment we will stand up as a community with great pride and admiration for those who walk the extra mile for preserving the Quran. There were many things I wanted to share more, but 1969 captured my mind this morning. I wish and pray to the Almighty Allah that this initiative will grow from strength to strength. The senior people who remain in our midst of the leadership of Jam'iyatul Qurra, Sheikh Musa Gauder, Imam Ali Khirdin, all the senior people, Hafiz Abu Bakr, and all those who continue to contribute, the business community, you cannot but remain in the best form of investment for yourself, for the community, for the deen of Allah, for humanity at large. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless all your valuable contributions. Preserve Jam'iyatul Qurra, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will indeed show us the fruits of our efforts in the future. And if we don't see it, future generations will celebrate it. Shukran. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.
Shukran, Maulana Iksan. And thank you very much for that special moment during your speech that touched us all. For the rest of the speech, I think it was very, very, very inspiring. Alhamdulillah. Right now, I'm going to introduce one of the board members, Dr. Yusuf Lalkan. Dr. Lalkan is a graduate from London University. He's got a master's from London University. He's got a PhD from Pretoria University. He was at one time the director of EROS, but he's a very, very important board member of Jam'iyatul Qurra. I call upon Dr. Yusuf Lalkan to take us through a profile of Jam'iyatul Qurra as a center of excellence. Dr. Lalkan.
Assalamu alaikum, respected guests and colleagues and friends. The board has asked me to just very briefly, and I am going to be brief, to run through the center that is hosting the occasion here today. And in doing so, I'm mindful of three things. One is the time constraint, so I'll be more brief than I normally would have been. I'm also mindful that I'm talking about an organization that has, over the last few years, developed in a very complex way, and I need to decide where to focus the attention on. But I'm also mindful of the fact that we have a very diverse audience here today. There will be many who knows Jam'iyatul Qurra quite intimately. And there will be others for whom the organization will be an introduction here today. So in doing that, we were concerned as to where we should focus our attention on. And so the decision as to what is the element that we will highlight today took us a bit of discussion. And I think we came to the conclusion that for today, we would want to focus on Jam'iyatul Qurra as a brand. We want to talk about Jam'iyatul Qurra in terms of what it means to those of us who work intimately in the organization, but hopefully in the course of this morning, introduce you to that particular brand. Now, when one talks about the brand of Jam'iyatul Qurra, I think there were three elements that we wanted to highlight. I think the first one is, what is it that Jamiatul Qura promises as an organization? In other words, what keeps us ahead of the pack, as it were? What makes us distinctive as an organization when there are many, many other organizations who do exactly what we are doing? And in doing that, I think this morning when I listened to Maulana, I realized that the promise of Jamiatul Qura is a promise that was made in 1652, and what we do is nothing but a continuation of that particular legacy. I want to talk about the people in the organization and what are the particular values that we have formulated for ourselves and for the organization, and in many respects how those very values have determined not only the character and the identity of the organization, but how those values in fact drive us as members of that particular organization. And thirdly, I want to talk about what has been the experience of the product of this particular brand. In other words, in what ways have we as an organization ensured that we meet the demands of our parents who enroll their learners at our school and who pay the school fees? To what extent have we met the expectations of the many, many sponsors and supporters of this organization? The legacy and the promise of Jamiatul Qura, I think, is firmly embedded in the person of Sheikh Yusuf Buli. And when I mentioned to the board that I'm just going to put down past president, they said that is insufficient. Because clearly, Sheikh Yusuf Buli is more than just simply the past president of an organization like any other organization. And they're absolutely correct. I think Sheikh Yusuf Buli was a visionary leader. I think Yusuf Buli was a person who could draw people from outside the parameters of Jamiatul Qura into Jamiatul Qura. And that is why the membership of Jamiatul Qura consists of so many diverse people from different backgrounds. And so yes, Sheikh Yusuf Buli, in fact, is the legacy of this organization. Sheikh Yusuf Buli established the promise that we will deliver a center of excellence in the memorization of the Quran. And with the demise of Sheikh Yusuf Buli, that particular promise has been carried through very clearly by his close friend and colleague, Sheikh Musa Gouda, who is here with us today. And I think it's appropriate to mention the commitment of the members of the board to the organization, that today is the birthday of our honored president. And he arrived a little bit late this morning because he had to receive calls from all over the world to wish him well. And I think it's appropriate that we should have this function on this particular day and in some way honor him for his birthday. This is what we promise, a simple promise that we will establish a center of excellence in the memorization of the Quran. And yet, we, as Maulana has indicated this morning, we do not want to institutionalize a process like that, but we've had to. And so in 2001, the 11th of February, through the contribution of a benefactor to the organization, we had then moved the Jamiatul Qura from the home of Sheikh Yusuf Buli to a school in Skarpkraal. And that school had grown tremendously over the last few years. It started off with, I think, an enrollment of about 30 learners, and we currently stand at an enrollment of 165 students at Jamiatul Qura. That is an indication of the growth of the school. From the initial 30 students in 2001, we have grown to 155 in 2012, and this year we have 165. Over the years, you will notice the growth in our graduates, and when we looked at the numbers, we have, over the last 11 years, produced a total of 71 Hufaz at Jamiatul Qura. Tremendous achievement, I think, for an organization like ourselves. During that time, I think we had participated in a number of national and international competitions, and our students have performed extremely well over that period of time. We have also, in the course of our work with the students, ensured that they participated in a number of taraweehs during the months of Ramadan. This is the last tamat, and I think last year we had a record number of 17 students who graduated in 2012. I think any organization would want to highlight some exceptional performances, and I think there are two young people in the boys' school that comes to mind. And last year we had the honor of a young man by the name of Ali Juman, who arrived in Jamiatul Qura from an orphanage in Nigel in Gauteng, and within a period of less than 18 months had started with the Quran and had memorized it. An exceptional performance from a young man. And he will, inshallah, be leading the Taraweeh Salah for us during the course of this year. And then the other young man that we'd like to highlight is Munir Sonde. He was the youngest boy student to have completed the Quran at the age of 12 years. And what makes him unique in some ways is the fact that he was the last student that was personally taught by the late Sheikh Yusuf Buli before he retired. But I think over and above the boys' school, the one area that Sheikh Yusuf Buli had constantly striven for in that is to ensure that more females enter the fold of the Hifz studies. And so it was with a particular sense of pride, and I look at the face of Sheikh Yusuf Buli in 2006 when he gathered a handful of young women together. Some of them were ex-students, and he proposed the idea of starting something that was not present in the Cape at all, and that is the idea of a Hifz school for girls. And you'll notice in the picture a thumbs up from Sheikh Yusuf Buli for the idea. I'm going to run through just very quickly the chronology of the girls' school, just to show you an indication, give you an indication of the kind of work that has been done. When we opened on the 16th of January in 2006, we were located at the Habibia Sufi Masjid. We then moved to a couple of rooms at the IPSA building. And during that time, within 18 months, the girls' school had already produced their first student to have memorized the Quran, Fatima Karbere. Within 2 years, the girls' school already had one student that tamated from the Quran. In 2008, within a period of 24 months, and those of you who know Sheikh Buli will know that there was no better fundraiser than Sheikh Buli. And he always said that asking money for the Quran is not a shameful thing to do. And so within 24 months, we were able to build a brand new girls' school on the premises in Skarpkraal. In February, we had our grand opening, and many of you were present at that particular opening. It was attended by ambassadors from all over the Muslim world. Our student numbers by then had increased to 54. The number of students who have memorized the Quran has risen to 6, and our graduates were 2 in 2008. By 2009, we already had the second and the third student who could complete the memorization of the Quran in 18 months. In 2010, we were honored to have an ex-student of Sheikh Yusuf Buli, Sheikha Ruqayya, who came back from her studies in Damascus, and she was appointed the first female principal at the girls' school. The student numbers have then increased to almost 100 at 89. 6 had memorized and 2 had graduated. In 2011, we were honored to have one of our first learners from the preschool, Nazreen, who became one of the youngest, not the youngest, but one of the youngest students to have memorized the Quran. In October of 2012, we had the youngest student to memorize the Quran at the age of 10 years old, Anan Arifdin. The girls' school, that's the brand new school that was built 2 years after the establishment of the school. This is the opening of the premises in February of 2006. These are the girls who tamated both in 2000 and 2011 and 2012. And these are the young learners. That is the products, that's the promise, that is the expectations that people have of us, and that is the demand our parents make on us. Anan Arifdin completed the memorization in 10 years, and Nazrin obviously at the age of 11 years. We're also proud to have a preschool. And so while we build the girls' school, we simultaneously established the Montessori preschool. A brief glance at that particular school shows a staff component of qualified Montessori teachers. We have 4. We have currently an enrollment of 40 learners. And of those learners who have gone through the preschool, 28 learners went into the Quran during the time while they were at preschool. 17 learners while at preschool were able to commence with their Hifz studies and then continue with that at the girls' school. We currently have 4 learners for this year who started with their Hifz. And the youngest learner who have entered the Quran was also the youngest learner who had memorized the Quran, namely Anan Arifdin. They memorize, they have a social obligation, they collect things for the old age home, and they play. What is the cause of the success of Jamiatul Qira? Well, I could say that it is all of these things. There's teamwork, there's motivation, there's inspiration, there's leadership. But that doesn't make us distinct from any other organization who claim to have their success embedded in those very qualities. But Jamiatul Qira, I think, is an organization with integrity, with authenticity. It's an organization that is clearly committed to something far bigger than ourselves. And once again, I make reference to Maulana's talk this morning. We are a continuation of a legacy that stretches back many, many years. So what else do we bring to the organization that's very distinct and unique? I think it is our ethos. It is the qualities that we have embedded in the organization that in fact forms our character and drives us. So Shura, the active invitation and seeking of engagement and consultation in the way that we are doing here today is a characteristic of this organization. Ada, the manner in which we engage, and we're clearly one of the few organizations, I've been involved with it for more than 12 years, so it feels like 20. We engage constantly and we disagree constantly and we resolve it amicably constantly because we engage with respect and courtesy to others. We have ikhlas and we know clearly why we are doing what we are doing, and we remind ourselves that we should be constantly aware of intention. Why are we doing what it is that we are doing? Nasiha, we seek advice and guidance from a very broad collective of people. And ta'awun, we seek cooperation with others. And so when we meet others who share our vision and our mission, we are willing to cooperate with them. And how is that ethos then translated into our priorities going forward? I think these are the 5 priorities for this organization. One is, as an organization, we constantly set clear directions, priorities, and accountabilities, and also boundaries for ourselves. We should know what it is that we can do and what it is that we can't do. An organization must be streamlined, it mustn't be cumbersome, and so we want to constantly increase our efficiency and reduce the complexity so that we can deliver speedily. And of course, we want to deliver on our strategic plan over the next 5 to 10 years. We're worried about and constantly look at our financial framework. We are aware that Sheikh Buli was the fundraiser for this organization for the better part of his life. And with his demise, we need to look at and restoring our contact with people that Sheikh Yusuf Buli had contact with. We need to secure sustainable income, and we need to explore broader funding stream because the organization is an expanding organization. We wish to establish a school within the next year or 2 to take our learners from the preschool into a formal academic stream as well. We develop our people constantly in terms of capability and capacity, but more important, we listen and we integrate diverse perspectives from people. We evaluate our performance in terms not only of Hifz, but we want to introduce a comprehensive curriculum that produces people of character, people that can participate as active citizens in this country, people who know that they have a dual responsibility of personal reformation and self-obligation and social responsibility. And finally, I think we want to constantly look at ways in which we can forge strategic alliances with as many people as possible. I want to conclude by saying, by reminding of a verse that we all know. The best of you are those who learns the Quran and teaches it to others. It's not a role that we are all privileged to be part of. We can't all learn and we can't all teach. But I want to just add in conclusion, who can be better than those who support those who learns the Quran and teaches it to others? Jazakallah. Assalamu alaikum.
Shukran for that profile, Dr. Lalkan. Just an important point that I need to make. In your pack, you have a question slip. So what we'd like you to do is to, if there are any questions on what Maulana said or what Dr. Lalkan has said so far and what is going to be said later on, write down your questions and pass that on to Anwar van der Skyf in the front here, inshallah. The next speaker is a student of Risale-i-Nur, a contemporary Quranic tafsir written by Bedi-uz-Zaman Said Nursi. She is currently based in the presidency and works very closely with our current Deputy President, Kgalema Motlanthe. Before that, she was the Director of Research in the Parliament of South Africa. She's also a former MD of the Paraffin Safety Association of South Africa. She has also owned and managed AIT, a professional consulting services company. I call upon Nazima Ahmed to address us.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bedi-uz-Zaman Said Nursi, in his Quranic tafsir, the Risale-i-Nur, says, Bismillah is the start of all things good, so we too shall start with it. I thought that I would start the presentation today, given the fact that we are gathered at a strategic leadership forum. And I thought that it was useful to start off to really reflect on what is the role and responsibility of the thought leaders that have been gathered here today. Jamiatul Qura have clearly identified certain individuals to be able to come and share some thoughts and insights at the Strategic Leadership Forum. Now, first of all, I think that the role of thought leaders in this context today is really threefold. The first one is to sharpen contradictions where these may exist and to point these out. The second one is to initiate sometimes uncomfortable but necessary conversations. And thirdly, to identify the opportunities for growth and development for the Jamiatul Qura. Because I think if we are able to leave here today having achieved that, then inshallah I hope that the organizers would have achieved their particular objective. In terms of, when I looked at the invitation that was issued, the issue was that we are on a journey on a road to excellence. I would like to challenge that and to say that excellence can never be a goal. Excellence is a given. So because when we deal with matters of the Quran, excellence becomes standard. So I think we need to think a little bit more strategically about what is then ultimately the goal of this particular journey. So in redefining the journey, I think that excellence, as I said, is a given, and the journey that the Jam'iyatul Quran needs to travel is the road less traveled. It is not the road most traveled, it is the road less traveled. And I think that's the journey and the path of Aqaba. It is the steep path. It is often peppered with contradictions, with uncertainties, and with challenges. But I think, as has been talked about this morning, this organization is a robust one, but I think it's time that it needs to catapult itself to a different strategic level. So if we're saying that we are wanting at this Strategic Leadership Forum to engage in some different issues and to engage in some challenges that allows the organization to catapult itself to a higher level, I think that the end of the journey can no longer be the memorization of the Quran. The memorization of the Quran should be the start of the journey. And that the outcome of that particular journey, I think, is what we're engaging with today. I thought that it would be useful just to focus on 3 strategic imperatives for the Jam'iyatul Quran in its onward journey. The first one is to deepen its focus from memorization to multi-level transformation, because I think that is a very, very important issue. Given the context in which we live globally and locally, and given the challenges that are faced by our communities at many levels, but most importantly and most significantly, the challenges faced by our youth. The second one is to shift the nature of the relationship with funding partners. I think that's a very, very important and very crucial aspect of this journey onwards. And the third one is to ensure that the graduates of the Jam'iyatul Quran lead transformation amongst the youth. In terms of the strategic objective, strategic imperative 1, which is memorization to multi-level transformation, organizations are by their nature organic, and every organization has a particular accent and emphasis at a different moment in time. And I think if one thinks about the fact that Sheikh Yusuf Buli established this in 1969, there was a different emphasis and accent. As time has evolved, that has changed. And I think it's important for us to engage strategically with that issue. In this regard, I think it's important for the organization to move strategically from an emphasis on outputs to outcomes. Because outputs, yes, are absolutely important and absolutely necessary. Because outputs you can define in terms of quality, in quantity, and in terms of time. Now, alhamdulillah, it is very clear from the presentation by Dr. Lalkan that in terms of your quality, you are the best. But you have to be. You deal with the Quran. There is no choice. In terms of the numbers, that's, yes, very, very important. And also the time period in which you want to achieve your objectives is very important. But I think it is really necessary to shift more from outputs to outcomes. What is the impact in the community? What is the influence? Because think, for example, the organization needs to ask itself the question, if the doors of Jam'iyatul Quran closed today, what will be the impact in the community? That's a very important question in which to engage. Because if you're saying you are a necessary service and a basic service to the spiritual growth and development of this community, what happens if the doors close today? And I think that's an important question that the organization needs to grapple with as it continues. I think it's also important, that most successful strategic organizations operate on what is called an 80-20 principle. 80% of your resources and your effort and your time you spend on your core business, which in the instance of Jam'iyatul Quran is the memorization of the Quran and related disciplines, of course. It's not just that. But 20% of your time should be spent on defining what is going to set you apart, what is going to ensure your sustainability over time, and what is going to ensure that you lead transformation not only of the hafad that you produce, but also leading transformation in the broader community. Because that is a very, very important imperative that an organization like Jam'iyyat al-Qura has to address. In terms of the strategic imperative 2, which is relations with a funding partner, it is my understanding, and I stand to correction, that currently the model that exists is very much a donor-beneficiary model. That model in and of itself is an unequal relationship. So I think it is important that, and I would like to make a proposal that instead of an annual 2-week funding roadshow, that it is my understanding that the organization engages in, to gather all the funders and the sponsors and supporters in a strategic workshop, get them all together, and then discuss the vision, the mission, and the growth strategy of the organization, so that you're moving away from a funding roadshow towards a more strategic and sustainable funding model. So, and I think it is important because funders, I think, are often fatigued by people coming to ask for money, notwithstanding that it may be a very good cause. That's not the point. However, if one gathers all the funders together, you are able to harness their business acumen, you are able to harness their wealth of experience in terms of business, and then to apply those principles in crafting a multi-year funding strategy for the organization, so that you do not work on a year-to-year basis. And as Dr. Lalkan had pointed out, very much a lot of the support for Jam'iyyat al-Qura comes from the legacy of Sheikh Bouli, and that's a very, very important one. But I think as the organization matures over time, and those people who knew Sheikh Bouli may no longer be there, I think it's important to understand that a multi-year funding strategy is going to become an important issue for Jam'iyyat al-Qura. And I really would like to appeal to the organization, gather your funders together in the same room, harness their business intelligence, harness their networks, and harness the experience so that you're all talking the same language and you're able then to go forward by harnessing a multi-year funding strategy. The strategic imperative 3 is to ensure that graduates lead transformation among the youth. I think we will be very naive if we do not acknowledge that we are a community in crisis. Spiritually, we are a community in crisis. And, you know, often the index of looking at the development of a community is not manifested by the number of organizations that we have or the number of faith-based organizations that we have. We need to look at the state and the health of our community based on the state of health of our youth. That is the most important index for looking at the well-being of a community, is the state in which the youth find themselves. Because that gives one an insight into how well we are doing or how well we are not doing. So I think one of the challenges for Jam'iyyat al-Qura is to, in a sense, shift from memorization to internalization. That is a very, very important issue for the organization as it is forging its way ahead. Because we all understand that, alhamdulillah, the Quran has the most phenomenal transformative power. How do we harness the transformative power of the Quran, not only at the individual level in terms of the Hufad, but how do they become the transformative and thought leaders of our communities, particularly amongst the youth? And I think that's a very, very important issue. In terms of then internalization, how does the Jam'iyyat al-Qura then, not only as an organization in terms of its institutionalization, but also in terms of its graduates, how do you broaden your impact and your influence? in the broader community. Because organizations cannot exist in and of themselves. They are there to provide a service. Now, in that service, how is it impactful and how is it influential in changing the spiritual dynamic that currently operates within our community? And I think very importantly, it's so necessary that the Hufad of the Jamiatul Qura are the custodians of the Quran. So how do they become the role models for the youth? Because in the absence of really role models with integrity and role models of authenticity, how do our youth in our communities look up to young people who have excelled in character, in adab, and in morality and integrity? Those become then the thought leaders for other youth. And this is an important issue that I think that the organization have to grapple with. How does one then effect that particular kind of transformation amongst the graduates? So, and I think it also, in many respects, creates an opportunity for the Jamiatul Qura to identify how to involve youth in your institution, organization's governance and in succession. Because remember that the cadre of leadership that currently exists in the Jamiatul Qura also have a sell-by date. So how do you then harness the energy and the passion and the internalized Quran on the part of the youth? So how do you then create opportunities within the organization to mentor these young people, to involve them in the governance of the organization so that they, inshallah, become the future thought leaders of the Jamiatul Qura? I would like to say in conclusion that any organization must grapple with three important issues: effectiveness, sustainability, and transformation. Any organization, in order to ensure the effectiveness, must ensure that what they do absolutely well, because then they will always remain effective. What they do differently is what ensures their sustainability. And the transformative power of the Quran is really, really what is going to become the mainstay. If one thinks globally, for example, that our economic institutions have failed us, precisely because they operate on the principles of riba and there's the non-payment of zakah. Our political institutions have failed us because they have no moral leadership. They are peppered with corruption. So therefore, my appeal is that the real transformation in any society has to come from faith-based organizations, precisely because faith-based organizations derive their moral authority from the Quran and the Sunnah, and their ultimate accountability is to Allah Jalla Jalaluhu. So there is no interference in terms of what is self-serving or what is personally beneficial. The roles are very clear. So therefore, the Jamiatul Qura has a very, very important role to play as a thought leader and as a transformative institution, not only for our community, but in fact for South Africa, and then also for the globe. Because the way of the Quran is the only way to a true civilization. It does not depend on technology, and it does not depend on any other form of advancement. It merely speaks to the issue of the Quran is the only true civilization. And I'd like to conclude by quoting from Badiuzzzaman Sayyid Nursi, who says, Quranic wisdom gives instruction and training to man in his personal life and his social life. So my appeal to the Jamiatul Qura today, in your journey forward, harness the instructive and teaching capacity of the Quran as you navigate your way into the future. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Shukran Nazima for that very, very insightful contribution here this morning. I just want to remind everybody that we will be going live on radio at 11 o'clock. We're going to call upon our next speaker, but I'm going to introduce him first, and that is Sheikh Saadullah Khan. Just very briefly, Sheikh Saadullah Khan is a Hafidhul Quran. He's memorized the Quran at a tender age of 8. While studying law at University of Durban, Westville, he was also the Amir of the MSA, and where he cut his teeth as an anti-apartheid activist. He also studied journalism in Britain and Islamic studies in Egypt, as well as the United States of America, and has presented numerous papers at many conferences throughout the world. He's the author of the popular text, Dimensions of the Quran. He's co-translated the classical Arabic text, Risalatul Mustarshideen, the epistle for the seekers of guidance. He has been a religious leader for the last 25 years, a teacher of the Quran, a motivational speaker, as well as an educator. I call upon Sheikh Saadullah Khan.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين وعلى أصحابه وعلى جميع الأنبياء والمرسلين قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وأصحابه وسلم خيركم من تعلم القرآن وعلمه وقال صلى الله عليه وسلم إن الله كتب الإحسان على كل شيء أو كما قال صدقت يا رسول الله. In the name of Allah, most gracious, most merciful, all praise is due to our Creator, our Cherisher, our Nourisher, and our Sustainer. We bear witness there's none worthy of worship but Allah. And we bear witness, we believe in all the prophets who came in the great line of divine. And we bear witness that Prophet Muhammad ibn Abdullah, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam, is the final of all the emissaries of Allah. Respected elders, ulama, brothers and sisters, I greet you with the Islamic universal greeting of peace. May the peace, the mercy and the blessings of Allah be upon each and everyone present here. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. Sheikh Ihsan Nadwi Hendricks said a few words early on. I spoke from the heart, of course, unscripted. But he made reference to a few poignant issues. He referred to how Islam came. He spoke about the early history, the Raja of Tambura, of Tuang Guru. He spoke about how Quran was taught, specifically in the Bukab, in the homes of the Shuyukh. He spoke about the Awwal Masjid. Spoke about the preservation of the Quran and the perpetuation of the legacy of the Quran. And it just shows how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala works. Wallahu khairul makirin. Allah is the best of planners. I grew up in the Bukab. I'm not from the Bukab, from a very small town in somewhere in the Northern Cape, which nobody would know. But I grew up in the Bukab. I studied in the front room of Sheikh Salih Abadi. I revised my Quran. I lived in August Street. I revised my Quran opposite where I lived by Sheikh Hanif Buli, whose some of the sons are here today, in whose home I virtually grew up. And then, of course, Sheikh Salih Abadi, our Ustad, also became the Imam of the Awwal Mosque before he passed away. Many years afterwards, we had an institution at Masjid al-Quds at that time, Ikausa, where Sheikh Ihsan Nadwi and myself were teaching the Quranic Studies department. And in the Quranic Studies department, our students was Muallima Faiz Al-Amara and Sheikh Abdul Karim Davids, both of whom are heading the Jamiat al-Qurra. One is administrator of the girls' college, and one is the principal of the boys' college. No planning, Allah knows. And on that Ikausa board, we had Brother Farid Sayyed and Tahir and Brother Nazir Osman. And Nazir Osman now is here at the school where I'm now involved in, hosting this event, and he was part of the board at that time. He's the chairperson of this institution right now. My point I'm making is, you could never script this. Allah knows best how He works and His plans. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us to be agents of the fulfillment of His noble plans. The topic given to me is something which I never ever addressed before, so bear with me. It is corporate social responsibility in augmenting institutions of empowerment. So please don't expect an impassioned khutbah kind of a thing. It's a very clinical topic. The World Business Council for Sustainable Development, in its publication Making Good Business Sense, defined corporate social responsibility, which is a theme, as the continuing commitment by business to behave ethically and contribute to economic development while improving the quality of life of the workforce and their families, as well as the quality of the local community and the society at large. And therefore we say, corporate social responsibility equates commercial or business philanthropy. And philanthropy, by its very Greek definition, made up of two words, philo, which means loving. So you get the word philosophy, philosophia, love of wisdom. Philo means loving in the sense of benefiting, in the sense of caring, in the sense of nourishing, loving in that sense, like a mother to a child. And anthropos means about humanness, about humanity, about being human. So therefore, business philanthropy or philanthropia, loving what it is to be human, to be caring and nurturing of humanity at large. And this is considered to be the key of the essence of any civilization, as well as even of our faith. The Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam said, hadith documented in the Musnad of Ahmad ibn Hanbal, he said, "Al-mu'minu ya'laf wa yu'laf, wa la khayra fi man la ya'laf wa la yu'laf, wa khayrun nasi anfa'um lin-nas." A believer is loving and lovable, caring and cared for. There is no goodness in one who neither loves nor is lovable, and the best of all of you are those who are best to humanity. Another hadith also authenticated and found in numerous books, including Sahih Muslim. أفضل الإيمان أن تحب للناس ما تحب لنفسك. The highest expression of your faith is to love for humanity what you love for yourself. And even in a poetic expression of Maulana Altaf Hussain Hali, who wrote in his Musaddas, दर्द दिल के वास्ते पैदा किया इंसान को वरना ताअत के लिए कुछ कम नती करो बयान. It's for the love and caring and nurturing and helping and supporting of one another that Allah has made you. If you think Allah made you purely for ritual worship, He got millions of angels doing only that. So corporate philanthropy is about patronage. It's about backing. It's about magnanimity, about generosity of spirit, sakhawat al-anfus. It's about altruism. And this is very significant for us to tie the notion of corporate social responsibility with altruism. Altruism is an ethical doctrine which denotes concern for the welfare of others. And this is a fundamental characteristic of all faith. Love for others what you love for yourself is the essence of humanity, what we call the ethic of reciprocity, or what we call the golden rule. Love for others what you love for yourself is a common denominator for all faiths. It's an ethical doctrine which connotes concern and welfare for others. It's opposed to two diseases in our society. One is egotism which is concerned only for the self. Because altruism is not about self-centeredness. It's about selflessness in essence and in action. And also, altruism is opposed to the notion of egoism, which is concerned only for personal gain. What do I get out of it? If I give, sometimes we do things, and sometimes it's promoted even by sometimes the way our scholars, I remember when I was a kid, they always say, if you give so much to the mosque, you get so much sawab. You do so much. So you do it, of course, we believe in the ajr. But you don't do it purely for that reason. As Sayyidina Ali Karamallah Wajah said, مَن يَعْبُدُ اللَّهَ رَغَبَةً فَتِلْكَ عِبَادَةً التُّجَّارِ. If you worship Allah merely and purely for material gain, then it's a worship of a businessman. I know I'm speaking to business people, but nonetheless. It's opposed to egoism, which is only concern for the self-image. What do I get out of it? If I don't get anything out of it, I don't give anything. So we can deduce from that corporate social responsibility is the empathy. Sympathy, you feel how somebody else feels, mashallah, I'll make dua for you. Empathy is you get involved. You not only feel what they feel, you become involved in their feeling. It's different. Sometimes, for example, we give charity to the orphans and we feel good about it. That's a good thing to do, but it's a starting point. It is to see in that orphan the Prophet, who was also an orphan. To be able to feel, to be able to know, I've given a donation to the people of Palestine today, and tomorrow they still go under struggle. It still continues. I can't say, well, I gave last month and why again? The struggle continues. Are you part of that continuous struggle? Empathy. Empathy is different from sympathy. Empathy means feeling the reality and focus on the enhancement of society. And therefore, corporate social responsibility is an expression from the business sector about the universal notion of ihsan, incorporating the local spirit of Ubuntu. Ubuntu is an ancient African term meaning humanity to others, or as Desmond Tutu said, I am what I am because of who we all are. That's how he defined it. Ihsan is fundamental to our faith. Famous hadith of Rasulullah where Jibreel came to him and asked him, Al-Iman, Islam and Ihsan. One of the three fundamentals. What is Islam? What is Iman? What is Ihsan? And the Prophet ﷺ, in a hadith documented by Sahih Imam al-Muslim, Inna Allah katab al-ihsana ala kulli shay. Allah has prescribed excellence in everything you do. Inna Allah yuhibbu idha amala ahadukum amalan ay yutqina. Ihsan implies doing all the good you can, to whoever you can, whenever you can, wherever you can, as best as you can, as long as you can. So we see corporate social responsibility is an expression from the business sector of both the universal notion of ihsan, incorporating the local spirit of Ubuntu. Increased corporate social responsibility is more than just finance. You see, corporate philanthropy was once defined and always seen as the check a company wrote to charities or to organizations or institutions. But while monetary contribution is vital and critical, it is only one of the many assets a company can bring to bear in enhancing social institutions, especially institutions of learning not supported by the state. We don't have a Baytul Mal. That is why, increasingly, global corporations are rethinking their approach to corporate responsibility, evolving towards a model in which traditional donations are supplemented by innovative programs. I spoke to Brother Ismat and Brother the last time. We need to, inshallah, see that Jamiat al-Qurra goes from being a Tahfidh al-Quran section to an institution which also teaches qira'at, eventually gets involved in being a Quranic institute where you do tafasir, translations of tafasir, where eventually you have leadership evolving from the Quranic spirit in keeping with the prophetic line of leadership. Because there's so much lacking. We have many leaders, but leadership are absent. So, donations supplemented by innovative programs and active engagements that facilitate the advancement of institutions from where they are to where they could be or where they should be. For starters, corporations could provide recommendations together with contributing capital and technology. We must take an active role and a transparent role in maximizing the company's interaction and build an impactful and long-term partnership and relationship, not merely a relationship by check, but a personal relationship. In other words, educate rising generations and create the fundamental conditions for a widely shared prosperity by merging the academic advancement, intellectual advancement, spiritual advancement, as well as support from the institutions of finances. Investment in human potential should be for human goodwill and for social improvement. Invest in human beings. Very often we invest in brick and mortar, which is important for housing human beings, but invest in human beings. Jamiat al-Qurra, investing in something of that nature, an institution of that nature, is an investment in those engaged in imbibing the Quran. And both the previous speakers have alluded to that, the significance of the Quran, that final source of divine guidance, remaining now as well as forever, a source of inspiration and the criterion for all people of faith. We are talking about learning. We are talking about Iqra. The very concept revealed in the Quran, the first concept was Iqra. And when we are funding Iqra or institutions of Iqra, we must ensure that Iqra is a way to open the mind and the heart. And we do that through facts and the pursuance of truth. You see, it requires a major paradigm shift. When you change the way you see things, the things you see change. If you keep seeing the way you saw things before, you'll always see what you always saw before. In America, they were saying, if you keep doing what you always did, you'll keep getting what you always got. It doesn't make sense grammatically, but you get the idea. It's like the American policy, try to make foreign policy. So paradigm shift. Because we keep on doing the same stuff. One of the problems that we have is we see the world, whether we're in our business, we're involved in whatever we are involved in, we see things differently. But when we come to Islamic institutions and Islamic ways of learning, we keep doing the things in the same way. It's very archaic, outmoded. So we can't produce what needs to be produced for contemporary society. That's why Sayyidina Ali said, أَدِّبُوا أَوْلَادَكُمْ بِغَيْرِ آدَابِكُمْ فَإِنَّهُمْ خُلِقُوا لِغَيْرِ زَمَانِكُمْ. Train your children with a training different from your training. The principles and the values remain the same. They never change. The Quran is the Quran, the Sunnah is the Sunnah, Sharia is Sharia, morals are morals. Those things never change. But change the way you teach them, because they are being prepared for a generation and for challenges different from yours. So, we need to open the mind and hearts through facts and the pursuance of truth. And we do that by changing perception, by enhancing knowledge, by improving character, and by manifesting compassion. You see, we can only open the hearts and the minds by removing prejudice, our own and that of others, removing prejudice with understanding, by removing darkness through light, by removing evil with good, by replacing hatred with love. If you can't do that, you're wasting your time. We need to synchronize our academic, ethical, and financial resources. Our academic, ethical, moral, religious, and financial resources, and synthesize all of these collectively and move from making excuses to providing ideas, from focusing on faults to finding solutions, from blaming others to analyzing ourselves, from focusing less on the inactivity of others and attending to our own possible contribution, from the limitations of others to the potential of the self, from making mere promises to fulfilling commitments, from letting things happen to making things happen, from the shackles of the past to the possibilities of the future. Enhancing involvement, business involvement in Jamiyat al-Qurra and institutions like these, while blending concepts inherent in corporate social responsibility with a coherent, cogent education strategy, could result in a sustainable model for the promotion of the study of the Quran in our part of the world. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant that Jamiyat al-Qurra goes from strength to strength. And to all of us, I leave you with a statement of the Prophet. And let this be the theme that we go as we have our co-sister of Sunday morning, the Sunnah of Cape Town. We had a Sheikh Shanqiti who came from Saudi Arabia, even with the coast at that time. So I tell him, Sheikh, he must take the co-sister. He said, Wallah, Sheikh, we have a fatwa here in Cape Town. من لم يأكل كسيستر يوم الأحد فقد أبى ومن أبى فقد كفر. Anybody doesn't eat kusister on a Sunday morning has refused, and who has refused, he become kafir. He said, no, give me two, I'll take two. Al-khalqu iyalullah, the Rasulullah Habib al-Mustafa sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, Al-khalqu iyalullah, فَحَبُّ الْخَلْقِ إِلَى اللَّهِ مَنْ أَحْسَنَ إِلَىٰ عِيَالِهِ. Let this be the underlying spirit of our deliberations and as we engage ourselves in our interaction with one another. All creation are part of Allah's global dependence. And the best of His creation in the estimation of Allah are those who are most beneficial to His universal family of dependence. I thank you. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Shukran, Sheikh Sadullah Khan. Just a couple of bits of information that I need to convey to you. The first one being that the questions must be written on the question slip in your pack, and it must be handed to Anwar van der Skyf and his team. The second thing that I need to convey to you is that there will be a summation session where all the panelists will be on stage and entertaining questions from you and also having a panel discussion. That will be chaired by Advocate SC Abu Bakr Mohammed. I also want you to know that the rest of the session from 11 o'clock will be broadcast live on radio. There's also a television recording, which inshallah will be broadcast to about 60 countries across the world at a later stage, inshallah. And there's also a recording for Al Ansar radio, which will also be recorded and broadcast later. Hussein Kajikar. Hussein is the Chief Executive of Mail and Guardian Media Limited. He's also the President of the Print and Digital Media South Africa. He serves on the board of the World Association of Newspapers. He has non-executive directorships with the Dramatic Arts and Literary Rights Organization, Media Distribution Africa, and Mail and Guardian Online. He holds a BCom from UNISA, and with many different other qualifications, he's also done an advanced media leadership program at Northwestern University in Chicago. Hussein started his career at M. Bray and Associates and has since had a meteoric rise in the corporate world. Hussein is poised to make a major impact on all our organizations. I call upon Hussein to address us.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Respected ulama, brothers and sisters in Islam, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jazakallah for a very warm introduction there. Can I just say that I feel completely humbled to be part of such an esteemed group of panelists here this morning, people who have played an instrumental role in making who I am. And Mushraq Bray's name was mentioned, Shawk Mukadam is here as well. Our ulama from our neighborhood, Sheikh Musa Goda, Maulana Ihsan. These are all people who have been very instrumental in my life. I'll even have you know that I once played football with Sheikh Sadullah Khan. But those were in the days that he could run as well as he could speak. I'm not sure whether that's still the case. But Jazakallah to Dr. Ismet and the trustees of the Jamiatul Qura for inviting me here to be part of this panel here this morning. My first interaction with the Jamiatul Qura actually took place in a very low-key manner a few years ago when I was informed that nephews and a niece of mine were students of Sheikh Buli. I don't recall, unfortunately, actually having met Sheikh Buli, and I'm very sad about that. But I'm sure I may have bumped into him or met him at some point at the Grass Park Mosque, and I'm very sad that I didn't pay close attention at the time. Then one Friday evening in January 2010, I was on a flight back to Cape Town, and I sat next to Uncle A.K. Pierre, and he gave me the sad news that Sheikh Yusuf Buli had passed away. And something then sort of just triggered inside of me that I needed to attend Sheikh Buli's janazah the following day. I don't know what it is, something told me. I had lots of engagements the next day. I recall the opening of the Cape Town Stadium took place the very next day. I didn't attend it because I felt I needed to, out of respect for the person that had passed away, attend the janazah. And it was at the janazah salah, or at the janazah, that we heard speaker after speaker, in particular Sheikh Ali, Sheikh Goda, talk about and pay tribute to the life of Sheikh Buli, much of which I was not aware. And with some of the following highlights, that at the age of about 16, He became a student of the eminent Ustad Sayyid Abdurrahman Maliki, one of the most foremost Hafiz teachers in the Arabian region. He was the first Cape Townian to perform Tarawih Salah in the Holy Haram of Makkah. He was the Imam of Great Street Mosque, and what particularly sort of touched me was his belief in establishing these schools, was his belief that one should strive for and adhere to strict codes of discipline, excellence, and approach the task at hand with devotion, sincerity, and humility. So these values resonated with me in my personal capacity and inspired me in respect of the approach that I would take in my daily life. So how does this relate to the media environment I find myself in? Well, it has inspired me to focus on the fact that institutions like the Jamiatul Qur'an and the Mail and Guardian ought to be able to survive well beyond the lives of any one of us. And the manner in which we do this is to adopt a strong set of values that we all subscribe to and put into practice as we go about our daily lives. And these values underwrite our sustainability, but more importantly, our credibility as organizations. And these values then underpin the manner in which we accomplish our mission, our vision, and our goals. And I'll elaborate on this. So news media is a public trust. The Constitution carves out a very special place for news media within the broader freedom of speech rights because of the critical role played by an informed public and the basic functioning of a democracy. Similarly, the work of the Jamiatul Qur'an is a public trust enacted upon or by our very own constitution, the Holy Quran. So on the media side, political reporters inform us about policies and personalities and processes driving electoral and institutional environment. Investigative journalism brings us the news that someone really doesn't want to know, and often this relates to corruption. And this is crucial for a democratic accountability. And business journalism helps us to understand and to act in a complex and dynamic business environment, while arts and lifestyle coverage talks to us and brings us close to the heartbeat of a culture. Now, this all sounds very noble, and it is. But outside of the public broadcasters, the independence that underwrites credible news is secured principally by commercial success and sustainability. And this places the media both editorially and commercially in what can feel like a deeply challenging and contradictory position. And I want to submit that this contradiction is a blueprint for the engine that can drive successful and significant leadership in a much broader context. For almost all news organizations, advertising is a key revenue driver, or the key revenue driver. And what do we have that advertisers want is an audience and our credibility. Where we deliver the audience in an environment that they can deliver the message is quite straightforward. I mean, think of the standard advertisement for a car or a cell phone. You'll find that in the sections of a newspaper, or the Muslim Views, or the local radio station. And that should be enough, a good ad reaching a good audience. But it isn't. The pressures nowadays on a changing media landscape and an increasingly message-saturated society mean that advertisers are looking not just to our audience, but they want to leverage on our credibility as well. And how this then relates to the Jamiatul Qur'an and its mission, I'll get to later on. So we have to keep revenue coming in if we want to keep the type of journalism that is core to our mission. But if we lend too much credibility to our advertiser, we risk losing our audience. And if the audience drifts away, so too does our business. And on the editorial side, there is a parallel tension. And print circulation in many environments is declining. And even where it isn't, competition to break news is quite intense. And one way to win this in this environment is stronger investment in journalism, in training and technology. Again, very similar to the type of focus we ought to be doing as Muslims. And this relates to what Sheikh Salah mentioned earlier about investing in institutions so that we can ensure our sustainability going forward. But in tough times, to win a scoop, there's often the lure to compromise your ethics in a media environment. And this could mean accepting one source instead of 3 sources. It could mean paying for stories. It could mean criminality. And we've seen what happened with Rupert Murdoch and his newspaper titles in London last year. And it can destroy your credibility, and it can also wipe out your business. And we are seeing this debate coming home to South Africa. Some of you may be following the story in the Sunday Times relating to the Sunday Times and its relationship with the Minister of Communication. So how, as a leader managing weekly, monthly, and quarterly results, do you deal with these contradictions and still ensure the longer sustainability of an organization? Well, for us at the MNG, I think, and I think for media managers broadly, there's a clear answer, and I believe it has applications that extend to leadership positions of all kinds. And the answer is enforced upon us by our democratic mission, as I had outlined at the outset. So our journalistic mission is founded on the values of transparency, honesty, and accountability. And the key drivers to lasting credibility of our brand are balance, depth, fairness, quality, and the truth. I mean, once upon a time, it was possible for media owners to be hypocrites, to buy ink by the barrel, and for them as media owners to determine the tone of the conversation, the commercial operations, and even sometimes the editorial ones, which were completely at odds to the values. This is now impossible, not because of regulatory pressure, but because of a declining public trust in unaccountable organizations. It's very important that there's a declining trust in organizations that are no longer accountable to the public about what they do. And the massive power of social and digital publishing platforms mean that audiences now own the conversation. It's an age of radical transparency and accountability, and whether we like it or not, there is nowhere to hide. And for leaders whose values are not sound, there's a huge challenge. And for those who put their values at the heart of their work, it's actually a huge opportunity. So being a Muslim and running an organization like the Mail and Guardian has also come with its challenges. Many of you would have felt for me at the time we published the cartoon. It was wrong. We apologized for it. And the ulama here, Maulana Ihsan, who was with us, can bear testimony to the lengths that I went to try and restore the damage that was caused. On the flip side, as the head of the Industry Association, I'm a strong proponent and supporter of community media, and I've been impressed by the quality in a publication like the Muslim Views and the role that our radio stations, Voice of the Cape and Radio 786, have played in enhancing Islamic spirituality in the households of the Western Cape. And the management of these platforms ought to be applauded and celebrated. I'm surprised that they don't get more support, because they too deliver a great audience to an advertiser, and we should no longer be treating our contributions to these organizations like donations. I mean, I believe that they're investments, and you ought to be lining up in getting your adverts onto these platforms. Working at the Mail and Guardian has exposed me to the cold face of the plights of some of our people of our land, and has given me a very strong social conscience. And I've become passionate in my support for organizations that do good and are accountable to their stakeholders for all their activities. Internally at the MNG, we share detailed revenue and profit and loss and numbers in discussion with our skeptical and quite often tough-minded staff. It's not easy, but the lesson in transparency with the numbers goes a long way to ensuring credibility in the activities that we undertake. SANZAF is a clear leader in this field and a great example for others to follow. Our mosques and our community organizations ought to follow suit. If you're publicly funded, if you are a publicly funded organization, you have to be transparent with your numbers, and you've got to do so timelessly. You have to live these values. And it astounds me that we continue to treat our ulama as if they're second-rate citizens. They are poorly paid, and muezzins who call us to prayer are the lowest paid of them all. I mean, isn't it the greatest tragedy that those that call you to success never get to experience even a whiff of what that success could be about? We need to shift our attitudes and our thinking. And with respect, present company excluded, I'll say, our ulama need to up their game, or better still, we ought to be creating an enabling environment for our ulama to be better trained. Leaders of the caliber of Sheikh Sadullah and Maulana Ihsan and Sheikh Goda are few, and we need to create these institutions to ensure that our leadership are better trained. In fact, nothing represents the shortcomings of our ulama, and this is my personal gripe, about those that single out individuals who perform their salah 5 times a day as namazis, like they are from some different planet. You know, surely they are Muslims performing what Allah has instructed them to do. In fact, we should be singling out individuals who don't perform this salah and then frown upon them with as much disdain as we do with those that consume alcohol, who don't fast in the month of Ramadan. In my view, a person who performs their salah 5 times a day is not a namazi. He's simply a Muslim. I mean, I think that term ought to be banned. You know, that's just the start. But on a more positive note, we do have numerous examples of successful organizations run by Muslims, and we should follow their lead. I'll refer to Mustaq Bray at Brimstone. It's just one example of how, by just sticking to basic, core, value-based investment principles, success can be achieved. I'm not here to steal his thunder. I'm sure Mustaq will speak about this later, but the growth at Brimstone over the past 15 years or so has been nothing short of phenomenal. So despite the struggle faced by media companies in transition from print to digital, we are stuck firmly to the values-based leadership approach. What are the results? We've had steady circulation in the face of massive declines in the country. We've had good online growth, 40% last year, and we have the largest audience that the Mail and Guardian has ever had. We have the largest following on Twitter, over 100,000 people on Twitter. And in fact, if there was a business sort of revenue model that I could just share with you, I would encourage the Jamiatul Qur'an to get onto Twitter. I'm not sure whether they are on Twitter, but it's an easy way to develop a revenue stream. Last week, with our 100,000 followers, we were able to sell our first advert on Twitter. You know, because we had a 100,000 audience and we could sell advertising for it. So it can start generating revenue streams. But these are the types of business models we ought to be engaging with as the Jamiatul Qur'an in order for us to develop a sustainable business model going forward. And that is not exclusively for the purpose of media organizations. Anyone, even in your individual capacity, if you've got something to say, there's a public platform out there nowadays for you to be able to engage with members of the public. And if you've got something good to say, you ought to be able to build a following very quickly. And who knows, perhaps even a revenue stream could follow. So revenues have grown steadily over the past decade. We are not the most profitable media organization. As we continue to invest in our people, and again, there's a lesson for all of us, but we are best positioned not just for survival, but for thriving growth in the coming decade. Ultimately, in the age of radical transparency, values-based leadership is the only foundation for significant leadership. And it is equally significant that Sheikh Yusuf Bulli adopted the same approach when he set out in establishing the Jamiatul Qur'an. We're all aware of the prestige associated with this organization and being a graduate from it, and we should all become more active in ensuring its longer-term sustainability. These investments should no longer be based on emotion, but rather purposefully driven to ensure a better future for ourselves as Muslims, for our children. And my challenge for all of you is to get involved. We need to walk the talk. We need to live our values. We should no longer be criticizing from our armchairs on each and every different issue that affects our society. We all have an opportunity to in some way now make a difference. All across the world, citizens are asserting their rights to bring about change. And we ought to be doing the same. It was the writer Victor Hugo who once said, "No army can defeat an idea whose time has come." I hope and pray that through our collective efforts, this institution may exist well into the future. Let us not disappoint the legacy of Sheikh Yusuf Bulli in establishing the Jamiatul Qur'an. And let's try and go about feverishly in trying to ensure and finding business models for sustainability for this organization and for other organizations of this nature. Jazakallah. Wassalamu alaikum.
Shukran, Brother Hussein. I think those were very insightful words, and thank you for trying to draw the parallel between what you do at Mail and Guardian and how we in our organizations can benefit. Shukran for that. Let me just inform the audience that we will be going live on radio for the next hour and a half as from now. The next speaker will be Mustaq Ahmed Inusbray. We all know he's the founder member and currently CEO of Brimstone Investment Corporation Limited. He's a chartered accountant by profession. He's also the chairman of Oceana Group, Life Healthcare, and Interfront. He serves on the boards of Nedbank, the Aon Re South Africa, the Scientific Group, Lion of Africa Insurance, and the House of Monatic. I do know that he's the driving force behind the Abdullah Harun Educational Trust, but he's also done some amazing work in trying to empower the youth. He's a trailblazing businessman, and he's an icon in business for us. I call upon Mustaq to address us.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين سيدنا ونبينا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وبارك وسلم. Respected elders, respected ulama, brothers and sisters in Islam, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. When the organizers of today's event came to see me, I was quite confused. I'm a businessman. What do they want to talk to me about? And then they talked about the renewal and the growth and the challenges facing our community organizations today. And I said, no, maybe I've got something to say. And I've got to compliment them. I've got to compliment Sharif and his team for what they've done. Getting us here today on a cold, wet Sunday morning. We couldn't be on the golf course today. The golf course was waterlogged. But it's good being here to try and share our experiences and try and see how we can, in actual fact, take the challenges which we are faced today forward. And in starting in actual fact today, I thought it's maybe good for us to just reflect a little bit. What has changed in the world in the last 2 decades globally? What has changed the impressions of Muslims in the world in the last 20 years? And I think one of the key events that happened was 9/11. 9/11 was an event that happened which, as far as I'm concerned, has changed the history of the Muslim world as we know it today. It brought to the fore new challenges, different views of Islam. On the one hand, we find a big resurgence of Islam in many countries, where Islam is seen to be the biggest growing religion in places like the United States of America, in spite of what happened in the USA on that day. We've also seen resentment of Islam in some areas in the world, where Islam became the war against terror. It was a word coined by some world leaders, and they said, we got to fight terrorism. The real issue, they were fighting Islam. But the more they were trying to suppress Islam in the world, the more Islam has risen up in actual fact. And in a crude way, we almost need to say thank you to them for having created these isms. Because I think they've awoken a lot of our Islamic brothers and sisters all over the world. We've in actual fact now stood up. We're standing our ground. And in everywhere where you go. Recently I was in Paris on holiday. Checked in at the hotel. I was a bit reluctant to find out now, what do you do about namaz and all those type of things. I spoke to the concierge. The guy said, look, no problem. How many days are you going to be here for? I said, I'm here 8 days. He printed me the salah timetable for the month within a minute. I asked him about the nearest mosque. He printed me a list of 37 mosques in Paris alone. So Islam is growing. Islam is alive. But when we travel, when we go all over the world, we need to interpolate. We need to go find out about it. Don't go away and think, look, it doesn't happen to us. It's not important. I'm on holiday. Namaz is not important. Being Muslim is not important. It is important. Furthermore, I asked him, can you give me a list of halal restaurants? He printed me a list of 152 halal institutions in Paris alone. So there's no excuse for me. There was absolutely no excuse for me not to go try and find a halal place to have my meals at. And this is what's happening in the world. The world has changed, and the world is still changing. So we mustn't sit in Cape Town and think, look, it's only the way we do things that it's, we are part of the world community now. With this terror, with this war against terror, we've seen Muslim communities and Muslim countries devastated. I think specifically of Afghanistan and Iraq. We see now what's happening in Syria at the moment as well. It's all part of a plot to try and affect and destroy Islam and what we stand for, because they see Islam as the real threat to what the West believes is their way of life and their way of capitalism, which we've seen in the last number of years doesn't really work either. But that's the way they feel about it. We've also seen the uprising and the fall of leaders in the Arab world. We've had the Arab Spring a few years ago, still completely unresolved. But yeah, it has brought a new awareness as well. And how do we relate to all of that? Do we sit back and say it doesn't affect us here in Cape Town or in South Africa? The answer is no, it does. And we should all be learning from all of these things. We've seen the increase in the tension between different schools of thoughts, between the Sunnis and the Shias all over the world. Again, it's become something which the West are playing at and pushing against the Muslims. They found a soft spot where they can drive a wedge between Muslim brothers and sisters. And they're using it. And it's time, in actual fact, that we stand up and we listen and see what, in actual fact, happens. Then in 1994, in April, we had the new democracy installed, the birth of democracies in South Africa. And we had big expectations. However, one of the first people, lots of people who suffered from the advent of the new democracy were the NGOs who in actual fact gave birth to the democracy. They were being funded because they said, no, anti-apartheid, we got to fund them. As soon as 1994 happened, a lot of those institutions are no more. I mean, if you go back and try and do a directory of NGOs that were in existence before 1994, and you take one today, you'll find a completely different list of names on those pages. And that's purely because people believed South Africa has become democratic, they don't need the assistance anymore. Little did they know that although we had our political emancipation, we are still economically enslaved. We have not had economic emancipation in this country. And the real issue today goes around, we talk about the simple thing of service delivery. There's an expectation of the person in the township. When he goes past and he sees the beautiful houses in all the other areas, he goes past the waterfront, that he's entitled to have a running toilet. And why hasn't it happened? Are we responsible? The answer is yes, we are responsible. They are fellow human beings, and we are responsible for that as well. We need to, in actual fact, sit back and take stock of ourselves, because if we do not do that, I can tell all of the people here today that we've got no future in this country. If we do not want to pack our bags for Perth or any other place, then we need to take heed of what's happening in our community. We need to go and make sure that we can try and see that democracy is actual fact going to work. And let's try and see how we can make the life of any of our brothers and sisters that are there in the country better. We've got to be part of the solution and not run away from it. We've also seen that Islam has become more liberalized in South Africa. I mean, we find many more women wearing hijab today, which is great. We've seen the resurgence and the emergence of Muslim media, especially radio and TV, and Hussein spoke about that. So in fact, they've had a big impact on our communities. We now fight about the fact whether it's the first of Ramadan or not the first of Ramadan, because they're having Tarawih in Makkah and Medina. I've seen it on TV, so it must be, we should be fasting tomorrow. It has a major impact on us. We've had families split where they're celebrating Eid on different days because they've seen it on TV. It's Eid tomorrow in Makkah and Medina. They're not worried about the fact that for more than 300 years, we listened to our ulama, we had a Aman committee would go out every month, not just for Eid, not just for Lebaran, they go out every month to cite the new moon. And we should respect that. So it's got new dimensions which will be brought into what's happened. And I think we need to sit back and see, how can we change all of those things? How can we become more tolerant, yet not give up what our esteemed leaders over the last 350 years have taught us and what they've installed in us? Because they were very, very good values. And we should not just walk away and think, look, it's nothing, it's modern day. Scientifically, they said they can see the moon and therefore we must accept it. If the culture and the custom we've had here, and it's worked for our fathers and our grandfathers, we should not be rude enough to just ignore all of those things. Then we've seen as well, after 1994, the increase in foreign Muslims settling in South Africa. And it's had an impact. We've had major communities from Somalia, Malawi coming to South Africa. We've had the Turkish brothers as well. And they've done some great work here as well. Our mosques are better attended, more musallis in the mosque. The Turkish community has come, they built a magnificent Islamic institution in the Midrand area, which is in actual fact probably one of the biggest, if not the largest institution in Southern Africa, I'm told. So that the dynamics are changing very, very fast in this country of ours. At the same time, we find that there's an increase in competition for the slice of the donor funds. We've got more organizations, we've got more youth schools, we've got more other tertiary schools, we've got more youth students, which is great. So for the same rand, we've got more people competing for that same rand. And the donor wants to know, where will I get the best value for that 1 rand, which I want to give? Since 2008 as well, we've seen the change in the economic climate in the world. We've had a worldwide economic recession. All the numbers they put out to you, they try and keep it in positive territory, but in real essence, the world has gone backwards. It's got major impact as well. If you now got money in the US or in the UK or in European money, you're earning less than 0.25% per annum on that money. The social functions are in dire straits. We've seen it now happening in Greece as well. Can you imagine being on pension in the UK at the moment and you're starting to live off your capital? And there's no social infrastructure, which thankfully here again in Cape Town, we've got that social thread, we've got that social infrastructure where I could very happily go and stay with my son or my daughter and it wouldn't be a problem. Overseas, these old people are living on their own. Their income has been threatened. They've worked their lives, saved money, done everything according to the book. But now, the currency has been destroyed. And this is something which is in actual fact very, very serious, and it could be a threat to us as well as we find, I know, and I don't want to talk about riba and interest here, but as the interest rates are coming down, it is becoming more of a challenge for all of our institutions to make sure that when the people are working for 30, 40 years, building up a pension, that they are in actual fact going to have a pension when they do go on pension. So how do we try and see, how do we address these issues? I think the big thing and the big question we're asking today, and a lot of the speakers spoke about it before me as well, it's the sustainability of the organizations. How do we make Jamiatul Qura sustainable? And that can apply to any of the other organizations as well in Cape Town. How can we make it stand on its own feet? And within this country, we've got examples of institutions where it has happened. If you look at the mountain, you see University of Cape Town. It's more than 100 years old. Very sustainable. And we need to ask the questions, why? And how can we get to those levels where our own institutions here in Cape Town can become as sustainable as those other institutions? And there's no reason why we can't reach out to our brothers and sisters and make those institutions even more sustainable than, for example, the University of Cape Town. In my own view, I think there are a few major points which we need to talk about. The first one, it's good financial management. I'm going to repeat that, good financial management. Are we getting the best return for the 1 rand? As Hussein said, when we give it to an institution, we're in actual fact investing it in that institution. Are we getting the best return on that 1 rand that we're investing over there? And I'm asking the institutions, are you spending the donors' money correctly? Because if you are not spending the donors' money correctly, wallahi, you're going to pay for that one day. Allah is going to be the judge. If you're wasting money that's set out for orphans, children, whatever institution, and you're not spending it correctly, if you waste your own money, you're going to have to account for it. But if you're wasting money that's been given by donors, may Allah's mercy be with you. And then turn to corporate governance. You know, when we invest in companies, one of the major things we look at, who you're dealing with. What are the levels of corporate governance? Do they have good corporate governance? And Hussein mentioned earlier, there are institutions here in South Africa would never account to the people who give them money. And it is not correct. They don't account timelessly. Yet we got somebody like Sanzef. Every Ramadan, you know you're going to get their financial statements for the previous year. And it can be done. The people in all those organizations can do it. We've got enough around here. We've got enough qualified accountants in Cape Town alone where we can spread them around and all those books could be done timelessly and correctly. Now, why isn't it being done? One of the first things which happens to me now, when they come to me and say, look, we're coming for a donation, not when Sheikh Bulli came, then it was just the amount that we had to talk about. It wasn't a question about that. I asked the guys, give me the last 3 years of your audited financial statements. And wallahi, more than half those people don't come back for the second meeting. This is what's happening, guys. You ask them for accountable stuff, and they just walked away. So if we want to get better governance, more sustainable institutions, one of the things I'm going to say, please, guys, we got to get the corporate governance better. You know, my late chairman, Jacques Gerwel, who was really an icon in this country, taught us one thing at Brimstone. And he said, Bustak, whatever you do, you got to maintain the corporate dignity of Brimstone. And I asked him one day, Jacques, what do you mean by that? He said, people will then want to do business with you. Even if the numbers don't add up, they'll know they're dealing with people of integrity. And that is a challenge I want to put down to our institutions. Let us become institutions of complete integrity. So when people ask us, we go out there collecting, and we show them what we want to do, they will just turn back and say, look, those are good guys. Even if the numbers don't add up, they're not going to steal your money. So go and assist them. And then, as one of the other speakers as well spoke about earlier today, we're going to talk about succession. You know, quite often we believe, and people believe, that they're going to live forever. Now, not even the great Ottoman Empire lasted forever. They ruled for more than 800 years, and then they lost. So none of us are going to be here forever. None of us are going to be able to run these institutions forever. So the challenge we're facing is we got to bring in new blood all the time. We've got to teach youngsters. In business, when my Remco sits down with me for the last 2-3 years, one of the challenges they put down to me is, what are you doing about succession planning within Brimstone that you're running? And I had to show them a plan. I had to show them where the youngsters are coming from, what level they are in training, and part of my bonus at the end of the year depends on that. So we need to bring that into our institutions as well, that we in actual fact plan for the next generation of youngsters coming through. We can teach them so that we don't lose the moral fiber and we don't lose the character of the institution. I'm not saying we must get completely new characters and that type of thing. We know the institutions have done well. Sheikh Buli's institution has done exceptionally well. But how do we maintain that? How do we keep that legacy going? Only by teaching the youngsters, bringing them in, and then slowly, in actual fact, handing it over to them. And then linked to that as well, we've got the, how do we garner support from our donors? Our sister mentioned it earlier. How do we get them in the same room and then get them on the same page? It's not just getting them in the same room. How can we share our vision and share our vision with them? That we're on the same page, that there's a common duty to be fulfilled. How do we get us all together so that we can in actual fact work towards one goal of serving and striving to please Allah? But that should be the ultimate goal. Not to please the board of trustees. And when we sleep at night, we must be able to put our head down on a pillow and say, yes, what I've done today was for the love of Allah. And that should be the challenge. Not to say, look, now I'm doing this because, Sharif came to see me and I must make Sharif happy. Otherwise, he won't give me a good price tomorrow when I buy goods from him. It shouldn't be the duty. Shouldn't be it. Should be to please Allah. And we've got to create self-sustaining financial models, as the sister said as well. Because if we don't do that, we're going to be quite irrelevant going forward. We're going to have this continuous challenges. And I'm not speaking against eat and treats. But how can it be that when I take my wife out for supper, it costs me more than when I buy a ticket for an eat and treat? How can it be right? Who is subsidizing it? It's very nice to have the eat and treat. I see people who I haven't seen for many months. I have a good talk and a good laugh and we have a good meal. But yet, when I look at the price of the ticket, it is less than when I take my wife to a restaurant. So how can it be correct? I'm not giving any donation. I'm paying for my supper. Somebody somewhere along the line had to make extra effort or give extra donations to make that eat and treat what we call a financial success. So we need to look at ourselves and challenge ourselves as well and say, look, what are we doing? Because if we don't, at the moment with so many organizations being around, are we going to compete with them? Or are we going to collaborate with them? Because in the end, it's going to be the survival of the fittest. In whatever game there is in the world, ultimately the survival of the fittest. So if we want to be independent, and there's nothing wrong with that, Jabhat al-Qura has got a great brand, it's got a great name, it's done great work over the last 40-odd years, and may it carry on for many, many more years, inshallah. But we're going to have to ask ourselves those questions. It was very easy. You had a very strong leader in the form of Sheikh Yusuf Buli. He was great. He could pick up the phone and do what the current committee can't do by being on the road for a whole full year. That was his ability. Sheikh Musa Gouda, the current leader, great leader as well. Where are the next Sheikh Bulis and the Sheikh Goudas? That will be able to muster, pick up a phone and do what they have done so far. That's a big challenge which we face with. Hussein spoke about the payment for the imams and the ulama and that type of thing. And it reflects over here as well. And I'm as guilty as any one of you. When we have our weddings in our families, we are prepared to pay caterers thousands of rands. We're prepared to pay everybody, the florist, everybody, big amounts of money. Do we ever ask the question that the imam that's going to do the nikah, that we are going to pay him? When we're at work, All of us keep logbooks as to when we go on business travel. I'm traveling 40 kilometers today, and I must be recompensed by my company for what I'm doing at the rate, the AA rate for the size of the car which I have. Do we recompense our ulama who come to our functions? They pay the same price for petrol that we pay. We go into the mosque, and we got the sound guys there, we got the TV guys there. They're using electricity. Do we recompense the mosque for that? My late dad taught me once, he said, wherever you go in this country, wherever you go into a masjid, and you make wudu at that masjid, please drop some money into that box. You are using the haq of that mosque, and you're going to repay it. So I think there are a lot of those type of questions which we need to ask ourselves. So when we talk about the ulama, and I'm glad we're saying that you brought this topic up today, we need to think about that. In the olden days, I can remember years ago, it used to be customary at the wedding functions that there used to be envelopes given to the massages and the madrasas and the youth schools and that type of thing. I think it's a great custom that's disappeared. You know, again, there was a lot of hikmah in that from our elders. You know, they told us about that, and they used to do it. It might not have been big money that time, but there was a principle that they did not forget the less fortunate at the time of their happiness. And it's maybe not a bad idea for us to go back to that. It doesn't have to be done publicly. You can just quietly give those envelopes as well. But I think it's something which we need to reflect on and see what we can do. I think there are many, many well-wishers out there. I think there are many, many philanthropists who are looking for opportunities to support. And I can tell you recently, a few years ago, we involved with another NGO, it's called the Sabr and Ashfar Relief Fund, where we assist people in Ramadan and with relief operations. And we were working from home, and we were in need of manual labor. We couldn't pack the bags. What we did, I spoke to my son at Vaste. He put out word at university on the intranet to say, guys, this is what's happening. Can you guys come and help? I promise you, since that weekend, we've never, ever been short of labor. We've had youngsters coming there prepared to help. They would come further and say, Uncle, can we also donate to this organization? So I believe there are people out there that want to do good. It's a matter of us finding them and seeing how we can bring them into our family. And we should encourage our society to leave a legacy. And I'm very happy to see Shaukat Mukadam here today, one of my former partners who's running an administration of estates and trust business. I think it's important, Shaukat, that you in actual fact, when people come to you to make their wills and that, tell them about our institutions. Tell them about Jamiatul Qura. Tell them about other institutions who are doing great work. So that in that way, they can leave a legacy as well. And they can leave some money for these institutions. So I'm going to plead to you, Shaukat, that when you go and meet these people, please tell them about not just Jamiatul Qura, there are other good institutions as well. But in that way, we can in fact build on that. And then finally, you know, if you come and visit me in my office, I've got a little picture over there. And it says, there's no right way to do the wrong thing. I'm going to repeat that. It says there's no right way to do the wrong thing. And it's a picture where there's a hand going into a cookie jar where there are some coins in. And the person is taking out some money out of a cookie jar. And it says there's no right way to do the wrong thing. And in closing, I'd want to bring that to the attention of all of you, that there is no right way to do the wrong thing. Sharif, thanks very, very much for the opportunity for addressing you and your organization and the people who are here today. And I hope I've spurred up enough thought in the people so that we can have a debate where we can, in actual fact, advance for the benefit of the Ummah and of Islam in general. Shukran. Thank you very much.
A big thank you to Mustaq Bray. I think those were pearls of wisdom that has come out there. And I'm sure you've inspired our organization, but you've also inspired many of the people in the audience here today. You've mentioned the word discussion and debate, and I think we've reached the point where I'll ask all the panelists now to come onto the stage, inshallah. The chairman for this session will be Advocate Abu Bakr Muhammad, SC, and I'm going to call him up in the next minute or so. I first want to introduce him, and he will chair the discussion and the question time. Let me remind everybody that in your pack, you have envelopes or you have a slip on which you can write your question. So please do that immediately and pass that on to Anwar van der Skyf, Aslam Khirdin and his team. So I'm going to ask the full panel to be seated on the stage, and I'll ask in a minute, I will introduce the chairman for the session. So Mustaq, Hussein, Maulana, Nazima, Sheikh Saadullah. Advocate Abu Bakr Muhammad is a Hafidhul Quran, and is one of the first group of students that finished his Hifz program with the late Sheikh Yusuf Buli. Abu Bakr Muhammad was also the founder of the Muslim Youth Movement in the 1970s. He graduated with a BA LLB and was admitted to the High Court of South Africa in 1973. He is the first president of the Islamic Council of South Africa, and that was in 1975. He founded Al Barakah Bank in 1989. He was admitted with Silk as senior counsel in the year 2000, and he served on many occasions as an acting judge. I call upon Hafiz, Advocate Abu Bakr Muhammad, to do the summation for us before we get into the panel discussion, inshallah.
Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil mursaleen, Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'een, walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. The eminent Sheikh Ihsan Hendricks, Imam Ghaudar, Sheikh Ghaudar, distinguished Imam scholars, to the Hafizas of the Ladies Institute, and brothers and sisters. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. A very eminent senior counsel, upon retiring, gave advice to a junior advocate. And he said, young man, when you have the law on your side, you hammer away at the judge. And when you have the facts on your side, you hammer away at the opposition. But when you have neither the facts nor the law, then you hammer away at the table. I'm pleased to say that in the summation, I don't have to hammer away at the table because of the eminent and outstanding presentations that have been made by the various panelists. Starting with Sheikh Ihsan Hendricks, in my respectful view, a brilliant analysis of the historical continuity of the transformational effect of the Quran on Muslim society in South Africa. Starting at the same time in 1652, a convergence. As you know, Allah Almighty says, وَمَكَرُوا وَمَكَرَ اللَّهُ وَاللَّهُ خَيْرُ الْمَاكِرِينَ. They plan and they scheme, but Allah Almighty is the best of planners. 1652, we see the beginnings of a system based on individual discrimination, and a society that eventually reached its point in history that it's virtually buried in the graveyards of its own mistake. And we see on the other side the Quran and the transformational effect of the Quran that it had on the question of survival of the Muslim community. Fast forward to 1969, the Jamiatul Qur'an, and we see the beginnings of a new era for the Muslim community, not only in South Africa, but for many parts of the regions connected with our country. So you see the transformational effect, and we are very grateful for this analysis. I think it should be widely publicized and greater research being given. Also, the importance of the imams and their intellectual capacity, which many of the panelists alluded to, but I would like to mention very briefly that because of dysfunctional education, where there had been a separation from the secular and the spiritual, we produce dysfunctional minds, as a result of which we grew as dysfunctional adults, married to produce dysfunctional children, leading to this continuing process without change to a dysfunctional society. We constitute 25% of the world's population, endowed and blessed with 60% of the world's resources, but constituting 80% of the world's ignorant, illiterate, deprived, and persecuted. This is our balance sheet, self-inflicted. Self-inflicted. And this is why leadership, the need of the hour, is transformational leaders, not transactional leaders. Transactional leaders with MBAs, Masters in Business Administration, and that can be outsourced. But transformational leadership only comes through transformational knowledge. And transformational knowledge comes from the Holy Quran. This is why the thought of Jamiatul Qur'an has to be supra-territorial, supra-continental, and we go back to where the journey began. Because this is the business of the akhirah, is our conduct in the dunya. And the business of our conduct in the dunya is the quality of our eternal life in the akhirah. From this conclusion, there is no escape. All the panelists in the various streams have been mentioning, Sheikh Saadullah mentioned this eminently from the verses of the Quran and the Hadith. Sister Nazima Ahmad made a very insightful analysis, as did Mushtaq Bray, as did Hussein, and of course the first speaker as well. I would like to simply summarize, because it's 15 minutes, it's not possible to do a complete analysis of all the speakers, but what I have found in the trend was that all of us are going back to the complete direction of the Quran. If we look at the beginnings, Quran is the only document in human history, from creation of Adam alayhi salam to the present day, that is from a divine script from Lawhul Mahfuz, unadulterated by the human mind. And therefore, Allah's greatest gift to all of mankind. And the Quran is therefore Ilmul Bayan, the pure text, never, not a word contaminated. And the scholars looked at this pure text coming from the unseen world to tell us of the seen world. And therefore, these huffaz and scholars started the study of the Quran and went into the source of the Quran, which is from the unseen world, and therefore looked at the meanings beneath the verse of the Quran, beneath the script, which is the knowledge of the unseen world, ilmul irfan. Hence, parallel to studying the script was the study of spirituality and of the metaphysical world. And with that, because the Quran is telling us of creation itself, of the seen world, and the unseen world precedes the seen world, it gave us also and continues to give us ilmul burhan, that is the rational sciences. So the Hufaz and the scholars were not only just reciters of the Quran, they were men of ihsan. They walked the Quran, not talked the Quran. And in their walking, they discovered nature and made discoveries from science to technology, from numerology and geography, cosmology, and we produced the great scholars. And they said the justification for that was the verse, and many verses, hundreds of verses, of which one, وَأَحْصَوْ كُلَّ شَيْءٍ عَدَدًا, Allah says, enumerated my creation in numbers. So they were mathematicians. Muhammad al-Khwarizmi on al-Jabr, algorithm, and so on and so forth, all of which today's world, the knowledge economy, the technology and science depends on that. It started because the Hafiz looked at all three patterns in his entire life. But somewhere, some of the scholars said all that needed to be said has been said already, and immediately thereafter, as a result of this, Muslim scholarship stagnated. Ilmul Irfan, the great scholars became isolated from Ilmul Bayan, and eventually Ilmul Burhan, rational science, scholars of science from a Quranic perspective, equally became isolated to a point that all three became not only strangers to each other, but hostile to each other. As a result of this self-inflicted hostility over the centuries, we began to produce through such dysfunctional education Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde personalities. What we did in the mosque is Allah's business, and what we do outside is our business, without realizing that everything we do is Allah's business. This is the resurrection that needs to be done to get back to the original structure of knowledge. And the resurrection can only come through the medium of the Quran. Hence the need for this paradigm shift, as Sheikh Saadullah was mentioning, the need to change. إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُغَيِّرُ مَا بِقَوْمٍ حَتَّى يُغَيِّرُوا مَا بِأَنفُسِهِمْ. Allah will not change the condition of a people until they change what is in their hearts. So this transformation, knowledge, transformational knowledge, will automatically produce transformational leaders. And this is what the world of Islam needs. And the greatest need of the hour, not only for South African Muslim community, but for South Africans themselves, the entire South African citizenship requires transformational leaders. It will have a dramatic effect because politically, economically, socially, all that has been said is in the Quran. We don't have to necessarily go through the King 1, the King 2, and the King 3 report. Not that it's not important, it's there. But all that is articulating is what has already been in the Quran. I would like to take Hussein and Mushtaq Bray's final points. Just as a quick summary, is the first and foremost for Muslim transformational leadership, what we are taught in the Sunnah, what we are taught in the Sharia, is independence. That you do for Allah Almighty alone, because you're in a state of ihsan. Ihsan underpins Iman. Iman underpins Islam. So you're doing it not for the sake of rewards. As one of the panelists mentioned, you're doing it for the love of Allah Almighty. Nabi Muhammad ﷺ said that from the time of Adam ﷺ, all that the prophets have thought, to me as Khatam al-Nabiyyin, and all the scriptures can be summarized in 2 verses. One, love for Allah Almighty, and two, immense compassion for His creation. Hence, nurturing and nurturing and caring, all of this is combined. Second is because you're doing it for Allah Almighty and not for your chairman or for your shareholder. You're not going to vote because he's your friend, he came to see you last night, but you're going to do it for Allah. The first issue of corporate governance, as you will see set out very detailed in the New Companies Act of 2008, is independence. Now we are asking for at least non-executive directors or independent directors must constitute at least 60% of the board. The idea is to have independence. Exercise. So for Muslim leaders, independence is submission to Allah Almighty alone. And if he does that and he makes his voice known in the board or in the meeting, implicit in independence is the second quality of corporate governance is responsibility. He knows that the buck stops here, so he becomes responsible. Doesn't pass the buck to someone else, because his was the vote based on independence. Implicit in independence is accountability. Because you're responsible, you are implying by conduct that you will be accountable. And accountability, in turn, leads to its own fruit, which is transparency. Because you know you're going to be accountable, you are by conduct transparent. And transparency eventually leads to your conduct, which is fairness. Fairness to your board, fairness to your co-trustees, fairness to your staff, fairness to the stakeholders, that is a society, fairness to donors, and so on. And finally, because by nature you are fair, you are just. And now if we replace these 5 qualities, you cannot be just unless you're fair. You cannot be fair unless you are transparent. You cannot be transparent unless you are accountable. And you cannot be accountable unless you are responsible. And you cannot be responsible unless you are independent. There is no way on these 5 qualities that you could reconfigure. Because if you do, it's going to become dysfunctional. This is what I mean, that today's Muslims walk the Quran, both in the boardrooms, in the shop floor, in the factory, in the marketplace, because Nabi Muhammad ﷺ, when he was in the cave of Hira, and he attained the highest status of humanity, he didn't stay there. He walked down into the marketplace, into the mud of humanity, and transformed people into jewels and diamonds. This is the challenge of the hour. It is the challenge for the Hafiz, those that are associated with other institutions as well, producing Hufaz, that it is not just memorization of the Quran, but walking the Quran. Just one tiny step. One step of walking the Quran is more meritorious than talking of it for hours and hours. So my view, finally, brothers and sisters, is that this summation is the beginning. Sister Nazima Ahmed has made an outstanding presentation about, and I like the words, memorization is the beginning of a journey. It reminds me of one great alim once told me that in our beginning lies our end, and in our end lies the secret of our beginning. Because that is our journey. Our mission is the hereafter. وَمَا خَلَقَتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. Allah has says, I created jinn and insan that they may worship me. And Allah Almighty says that He has appointed all human beings a Khalifatullah. Khalifatullah responsibility to creation, not just being that for governors or presidents or imams, but for every human being to be responsible to each and every one else. With these words, brothers and sisters, I will now declare the session open for questions to be raised. I do have a few questions before me. And the first one is going to be addressed to Sister Nazima Ahmed. And it says here, I like your suggestion that Jamiatul Quran should move for objectives to outcomes. And can you unpack this notion a bit further?
Okay. Shukran for that question. I think it's a very necessary question that has been asked. As I said in the presentation, outputs are very much measurable and they are definable. Whereas outcomes shifts the operation from a level that is tangible to another dimension. And that dimension, by its very nature, is immeasurable. And how one begins to look at those kinds of things is that how, in fact, are the outputs, for example, in the case of the Jamiatul Qura, how are the Hufad more than just leaders of Taraweeh in the masajid? Because that is an output, a definable output of the organization. But how, as an outcome of their being Hufad, are they serving as thought leaders and transformation agents in catalyzing transformation within their spheres of influence beyond the musalla in the masajid? I think that is the challenge, the transition from output to outcome. Where is the transformation felt? How is the impact being made? And how is the influence being exerted in the spheres of influence in which they operate? And I think very importantly, just to reiterate something that I said in the presentation, how do they become thought leaders and role models of transformation for the youth in our society? Because ultimately, that will then be the measurable outcome beyond just the output.
Thank you. I have a question before me for Sheikh Saadullah, and the question reads as follows. Could our corporate business people contribute towards a fund specifically for Quranic studies, learning and teaching, and providing resources, for example, technology?
Yeah, I think, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I think in my presentation I made reference to corporate social responsibility in a holistic way, beyond mere financing. Financing is one dimension of it. Very often we find there is a contribution, financial contribution, and that is how far the relationship goes. There's no partnership in developing the institutions. If you look in the early history of Islam, for example, you would find that institutions of learning were also self-funded, self-sustaining. And many institutions in the world, if you go to many parts of the Middle East, the Darul Ulooms, in whatever you may call it, Darul Ulooms or whatever, they were attached to mosques, were funded by the institutions and the businesses that surrounded the mosque, which belonged to the mosque. So they never in need of handouts. What we have right now is very often most institutions are highly dependent upon purely financial contribution. I was making reference to a partnership between business, which not only looks at the financial contribution to sustain an institution, but also finding ways of empowering the institution to sustain itself, and also empower the students and the graduates to be able to become effective agents in the kind of things that Sister Nazima spoke about. Beyond being people who just lead Taraweeh prayer, besides people becoming Hafiz al-Quran only, and as I alluded in my discussion as well, to make the Quranic, Jamiatul Quran, Quranic Institute, not only of memorizing the Quran, but also internalizing, understanding, implementing, and becoming leaders in the process by that means. So I think it's fundamentally important that institutions, especially financial institutions and corporate business, partner with Jamiatul Quran, institutions like these, not only on a financial basis, but look at what can we produce and how can we enhance a more positive outcome.
Thank you, Sheikh. There's another question from the floor, and that is for Mushtaq Bray. Question reads, how do we go about informing big institutions like Nedbank about Quran schools, their achievements, and thereby securing sponsorships from them in respect of teacher development?
Shukran for that question. I think that's quite easy. Nedbank employs just under 30,000 people in South Africa alone, right?
Mm-hmm.
A large number of those are Muslim brothers and sisters, right? Within that, they've got programs in their CSI, corporate social investment, that Sheikh Sadla spoke about, where they support institutions that their staff supports, where the staff can show that they're spending time and of their own money with institutions. They're quite happy quite often to double that. So recently I was with them in actual fact in a drive where we did Operation Winter Warmth in Philippi 3 weeks ago with Nedbank, where the staff had identified there was a fully trained nurse who was looking after 55 pensioners alone, cooking food for them every day. And Brimstone and Nedbank went in actual fact, and it was identified by somebody working at Nedbank. So the answer is quite simple. We should in actual fact ask the staff of Nedbank, the Muslim staff, that they bring it to the attention of their departments. And then they could be, working together. And it could be quite easy. I mean, it's not something which I wouldn't do.
Thank you for that. And we move on to a question for Hussein. Question reads, could we use Mail and Guardian as a media tool to inform people about the Quran, our constitution, and its basis in transformation and enhancement of the Muslim community?
Jazakallah for that question. Yes, of course we could use the platform, and it doesn't only mean the platform in print, but the platforms online and digital publishing platforms that we have available to ourselves. I mean, what is most important for an organization like the Mail and Guardian is for us to report, as I mentioned earlier in my talk, on issues that are balanced, fair, informative, and credible. And we do run a supplement throughout the year. We call it the religious edition. And there we do tackle topics from a religious perspective. And we, if the information is compelling, yes, we could use it as a platform to disseminate to our audiences on those various platforms.
All right. You can hold on to that. There's still another question to follow for you, and it is to say, can Mail and Guardian give us some idea of the data that they have, if any, of the number of Muslims in Cape Town, South Africa?
We do have access, but unfortunately it's only going to be to those that read us. So everyone that does visit the Mail and Guardian site, we've got access and insight to that information. But recently there was a census, and the databases are available, and I'm sure by accessing some of those databases, one is able to establish the numbers of Muslims in Cape Town, and I'm sure that the Stats SA people or websites will have access to that information.
Still one more question, and that is that while being a large minority Muslim community, why are Muslims not playing a role in political arena? You have any thoughts on that?
I think that people have just taken a back seat, and I think that someone described it to me the other day that our children nowadays are possibly born into an era where corruption has become quite acceptable. Hence, their desires for items, to be able to attain items by improper means becomes a norm in the society, and we've got to overcome that hurdle. Many years ago, our parents and our forefathers were very strict as far as issues of corruption is concerned. And Mushtaq mentioned the saying that he's got in his office about there being no right way to do a wrong thing. And I think that our
forefathers and our elders lived by that. And I think that we've entered a phase where corruption through various means is becoming acceptable in our society, and people have sort of taken a back seat. And I think that it's opportunities and occasions and forums like this for people to become engaged again, for us to create and to fix that abnormality in our society, so that the next generation does not get born into this kind of era that we find ourselves in right now. We've got to cross that hurdle.
It resonates with the very famous Hadith Qudsi, which reads, when Allah Almighty wishes to punish a people, He does not remove knowledge from the hearts of the people. Rather, He removes knowledgeable people from the people, so that people in their ignorance elect ignorant leaders, who in turn mislead themselves and misguide others. Yes. Nazima, I do have a question, but perhaps you could first comment on that one.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on the question and the response. I think the two issues that have almost taken hold of our communities, the one issue is the issue of complacency, and the other one is the issue of indifference. I mean, the question is, why are there not Muslim leaders? And I think the subtext of that is it's ethical leaders. Why do we no longer have ethical leaders involved in the political domain? And I think it's essentially because we have become complacent and we have become indifferent. And I think one of the earlier speakers have said that, you know, we have to become active participants. We are not observers, we're not participant observers. And we also have to look at our own lives and bring corruption closer to home. Corruption does not only live in public life. Corruption happens in our own homes. Corruption happens within our institutions, and it happens within our communities. So if we are able to do a test and say, what is the level of good governance within my own home? That is where we stop the rot of corruption. It doesn't start from the top. It starts from the bottom. And I think we have to engage as adults and as parents on what are those contradictory messages that we espouse and that we live in our lives, because that in fact forms the seedbed of corruption.
Thank you. And I would ask Brother Sharif Abbas, the CEO of the Jamiatul Quran, to comment on that as well.
Shukran, Hafizah. I just want to comment on the whole concept of corruption in society. And while I understand that might be there, and there is a possibility that a newspaper could offer some direction in that regard, I believe that organizations such as Jamiatul Quran should become an agency of moral generation. And with good principles from within, we have our guiding principles, and I think Dr. Lalkan alluded to that, the whole concept of shura, the whole concept of adab, ikhlas, nasiha, and ta'ahun. These are principles by which we live, and schools such as Jamiatul Quran ground these values, and in that way we make a difference to alleviate and virtually eventually solve that problem. So organizations out there should be well grounded in moral generation, and we should all become agents of moral generation, inshallah. Just as a comment.
Yeah, thank you very much. There's one question, at least two, for Maulana Ihsan. The first question reads, between 1652 and 1994, there was an explosion of Islam amongst the local inhabitants, and after 1994, there appears to be an erosion of propagation. Why is that?
I was getting very comfortable with the idea that no questions are coming my way. I still started thinking about as goed as jy sê as die mense vat as die gospel. So no questions coming my way.
Well, Sheikh, there are two more questions coming to you.
Definitely, I think the question requires more collective research and analysis and so on. So I'm not going to take a chance in 1 or 2 minutes. But I think what I want to say as an introduction is what we have seen here today at the initiative of Jamiatul Qurra is precisely what we need to convey as principal initiatives to all Islamic organizations in this country. And that is, and I'll start in my capacity as the president of the Muslim Directional Council,
Alhamdulillah.
that we must begin to recognize there are expertise required by us, not found in us, but it is out there in our community. We must embrace it, enhance it, and bring it inside our institutions. Because what we have listened here today and what we heard, the brilliant presentation, I was sitting and I said to Sheikh Saadullah or to somebody, we must bring Sister Nazima to make a presentation to the ulama. It's very important. If we are not going to recognize what we see in front of us, then we delay the progress. We delay wherever we should reconstruct and redevelop. And I think my honorable brother said that there are things who are very, very uncomfortable, but we need to deal with it. We need to deal with it. And there are some very serious concerns that we have, and particularly if from 1994 till now there is what is detected, then I think we need to unpack all the reasons that we see and the possible areas that brought this particular whatever it is, and through that find some solutions for the future, inshallah.
Sheikh, there are two questions, but I will combine both of them into one. The first one is, what is the legacy we want to leave collectively to ensure Quran and Islamic conscious leaders, and what role can the Jamiatul Qurra play to cement these two components in South Africa?
I think what we see here today and the legacy of Jamiatul Qurra, and I think I was absolutely spot on and principle when I commenced and I said, allow me to pay tribute to Sheikh Yusuf Buli rahmatullahi alayh, because it is a problem in our community that when we see good models of intellectual capacity and vision and foresight, we don't embrace it. We come to celebrate it after the demise of somebody. And that is why when I indicated, stop celebrating the karamat in the qubur. We have to celebrate the karamat in the living human beings. We see the karamat of integrity unfold in front of us. We see the karamat of stability, the karamat of vision. We see the karamat of wisdom. You know, my Urdu is not as good as Sheikh Saadullah and anybody else who's Urdu speaking here, but I studied in a city in Lucknow that is known as to be the best Urdu in the world. But I don't speak that caliber of Urdu. But there is a saying, as you know, Hafiz Abu Bakr, Neem Hakim, Khatar Jan, Neem Alim, Khatar Iman. A half educated doctor is a danger to the people's health, and a half-baked alim is a danger to the people's iman. And then finally, to conclude, is that 'n mens wil ook nie op die einde van die dag, ek kom by die woester uit, so ek lyk 'n bietjie Afrikaans te praat. 'n Mens wil op die einde van die dag wees in 'n posisie waar die medikasie wat gegee was vir die pasiënt is meer gevaarliker as die siekte wat hy het. So the medication can't be worse than the disease. So the road of excellence, as the theme is here today, whether we like it or not, we have no choice. Al-ihsan, wal-ihsan, wal-ihsan, wal-ihsan. And I am in love with what my brother said. There is no compromise, Brother Mushtaq Bray. It is what it should be. And there is, in fact, being, and I'm sorry for this, taking a little extra minute.
Please.
Sitting as the president of the Muslim Judicial Council, I would say starting with the Muslim Judicial Council themselves and ourselves. And there's nothing wrong to be honest, because honesty is part of our integrity. Every day we see unfold what I now would not hesitate to call high levels of corruption in the Muslim community. Through the administration of masajid, the administration of madaris, the lack of transparency, the failure of accountability with money. It is, as we say in Afrikaans, is die goddelike waarheid. If somebody entrusts you with money, you have the amana to show wat was gedoen gewees met die geld. And so the expertise that we have, the accountants, all the expertise that we have to embrace, and we should leave the masajid with no choice but to say, this is where we will have to reconstruct. That is the fardul kifaya of our zaman.
Thank you, Sheikh. There are several questions from the floor, and a very quick perusal of some of these questions. There are repetitions of previous questions, so I'm not going to bother the panelists again to repeat the same. And at least some questions were pretty obvious from the presentations themselves, so that again is to avoid some duplication. We do have constraints of time, and therefore I would like to keep the questions that are material and relevant and add value to the members present. One question is for Sheikh Saadullah, and the question reads as follows. We have had a great influx to Muslims from the rest of Africa to Cape Town. Many of them are scholars, or some of them, and Hafiz. How do we integrate them into our organizations and communities?
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. First of all, anyone who comes here as a Muslim from Africa, first of all, don't forget we are African. We are Muslim first, but also African. When Islam was refused refuge in Mecca, the first place of refuge for Islam was in Africa, in Ethiopia, under a just Christian king. So it's part of the tradition of Africa to embrace Islam and the Muslims, even by those who are not Muslim. We as Muslims, who have a great history in this part of the world, tremendous amount of freedom that we don't have in any of the Muslim countries, despite the boasts about Islamic government and all the Islamic names that attach in front of the titles. None of them whatsoever are half as free as we are. So we should embrace that, number one. And we should realize that Islam from the outset was inclusive. If you look in the first four Muslims, you had the first person, Khadija, a woman, wife of the Prophet, financier of the Islamic movement, wealthy person. Sayyidina Ali, boy, youth, family member. Sayyidina Abu Bakr, an elder, a friend, wealthy person. And Zayd, a foreigner, former slave, poor person. In the first four people, you have a cross-section of rich and poor, local and international, male and female, young and old, rich and poor. That's the first thing, embracing that. Number two, I think we need to get beyond these barriers that we have. We still have this kind of, segmented mentality, I think. Still a degree of racism, though we fought against it for a long time. And that not only as far as color is concerned and caste is concerned, as far as nationality is concerned, but even as far as madhahib is concerned and so on. We are so involved in fighting on secondary, unnecessary issues, absolutely nonsensical issues, which are very secondary, which are so old. And we keep on regurgitating these nonsenses through the mosques, through the masajid, through even some of the ulama, that we get caught up in discussing and debating secondary issues, non-fundamental to Islam or to our community in this country. So I think it's very important that we embrace people. And of course, as you say, خُذُوا الْحِكْمَ مِنْ أَيِّ وِعَاءٍ خَرَجَتْ. take wisdom, as the Rasul said, from any source. If there are people who are coming here, they are our brothers and sisters in faith, wherever they come from, Africa or anywhere else. But if they are African, they are closer to us. They are even closer to us by being Muslim. They are even closer to us if there are people who can contribute to our society. And I think every effort must be made by institutions like Jamiat al-Qura and other organizations, and MJC and so on, other institutions, to embrace the people as an integral part of our community, as is part of our Islamic tradition. Just a comment on what was said earlier on by Sheikh Ihsan. We said we must perpetuate the legacy, if I may comment on that. We must imbibe the values of the Quran, which is very important. Sayyidah Aisha, when she was asked about the Prophet, she said, Kana khuluqu al-Quran. The character of the Prophet is the Quran. You didn't have to ask the Prophet what the Quran said. When you saw what he did, you know what the Quran said. And that's very important. And just to, my Urdu isn't as good as Maulana's. I'm not a Nadwi. But I'm not a Nadwi, by the way. Nadwis are, of course, excellent in Urdu. But Allama Iqbal said about this. He said, Raz kisi ko nahi ma'aloom ke mu'min qari nazar aata hai haqiqat mein Quran. A strange phenomenon many people don't know. A true believer is one, though you see him reading the book, he himself is the book. Because the Quran is on the shelf, documented in writing. It becomes activated by our recitation. It becomes alive by our behavior. Shukran.
Thank you, Sheikh Saadullah. And there's the last question for comment is for Sharif, and that is, can Jamiatul Qura constitute a similar forum like today for young Muslims, graduates and professionals to build an organization similar to the Jamiatul Qura?
My immediate response is an absolute yes. Yes, we can do that. However, it is all contingent on the collective leadership of our organizations that are present here today to offer that thought leadership, to offer that expertise. And if that offer is made and they come like Mustaq and Hussein and Nazima and Sadullah and Sheikh Ihsan has come here today, then certainly it is absolutely possible. But it's not only the responsibility of Jamiatul Qura, I think it's the responsibility of every organization out there to try to create these kinds of forums. I think today is the prototype of a kind of forum that we should have not only in Cape Town, but in Durban, in Joburg, in the rest of the country. We shouldn't have one forum in Cape Town, we should have a multiplicity of forums. But it's all contingent on the collective expertise in the respective disciplines that we have here today. If they are prepared to offer that thought leadership, are they prepared to bring the kind of knowledge that they have within their organizations so that it can be transferred to the organizations that so sorely need it, such as Jamiatul Qura, such as IPSA, such as Islamia might need some of this knowledge, alhamdulillah. Hafizah, before I end, I just want to say shukran from Jamiatul Qura to everybody that's attended here today. It's heartfelt that you are responsible for the success of today's proceedings. And shukran to you. Shukran for that.
Thank you, Sharif Abbas. I'd like to conclude our session today by closing remarks. First and foremost, it is very strange that I too spent some 6 months in the Bokab. But it's not funny. I had some wonderful experiences in many, many years. Okay. First, I would like to pay tribute to my teacher, Sheikh Yusuf Buli, who taught me the Quran in 1959. I was his student in 1956 and traveled 2,000 miles from Durban to Cape Town with him, and came here in 1959 as well. And many years later, of course, traveling to Cape Town very often, I spent 6 months with his brother, the late Sheikh Hanif Buli, lived in his house. If I recall, I still remember the name, Darus Salam. Am I right? and just the opposite was Sheikh Saleh Abadi. Yes. So it is strange that somehow the other, half a century later, we assemble here this morning's session for what we call thought leaders or thought leadership. And if I may say, perhaps the Jamiatul Qur'an became the incubator. Incubate these thoughts because its sole curriculum is the Qur'an. And hence, I have no doubt that today's session, with panelists assembling, if we remember the creational law of cause and effect, يَعْلَمُ مَا بَيْنَ أَيْدِيهِمْ وَمَا خَلْفَهُمْ, Allah is the originator of all origins and the cause of all causes. If today is the effect of yesterday, it will be the cause of tomorrow. And therefore, no doubt, this forum and the kind of presentations and the thoughts that have been spelled out will be the cause for more such forums. I see this as our own little Davos, or a kind of little Switzerland in the most beautiful part of the world in Cape Town. Let's incubate this so that, as Sheikh Ihsan pointed out, all the scholars, all the business people with management skills, technicians, engineers, and lawyers, and every single one of our community assemble and start walking the talk. To all of them outside, hearing us from this session, I say to you, brothers and sisters, our time has come. Assalamu alaikum.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Our program says it's going to end at 12:30, and inshallah it will. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. The Nabi Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam has said, "Man lam yashkur lin-nas, lam yashkur lillah." The one that forgets to show gratitude to humankind, to mankind, does not show gratitude to Allah. So I am grateful to do this vote of thanks right at the end before our President, Sheikh Musa Goda, will be making the final dua. Our first vote of thanks is always to the Almighty. Alhamdulillah. What a beautiful day and what a beautiful time to reflect and ponder upon the vision, the mission, and the way that Jamiatul Qurra will go into the future in this very part of our Islamic calendar as well. Ramadan is upon us. It is a time for introspection as well as retrospection. So the time was apt, as well as also coinciding with the birthday of our President. Alhamdulillah. To the speakers, we say, you have done us really proud. You have given us a lot to chew on. It will take some time to unpack, and we will promise that we will unpack each and every thought that you have put before us. You have stimulated us with new kinds of thinking. You have pointed us into various kinds of directions, and we will publicize, with your permission, all of the thoughts as well as ideas that we can put Jamiatul Qurra and most other organizations as well going into the future. So to mention from start, Maulana Ihsan Hendricks, a huge shukran to you for guiding us. Sister Nazima Ahmed, you have tweaked new thinking and you have put us onto a road that we cannot return from. Excellence is demanded was your credo. To Sheikh Sadullah, again, as always, vibrant and prickling. We thank you for that inspirational talk as well as Hussein Kajika, as well as Mustaq Bray. New thinking and fresh thinking is what we asked, and you came to the fore. To this venue itself, being a token of an icon in the Islamic community in Cape Town, the very presence of Maulana Ali Adam, and also the organizers of this venue, Dr. Ilyas Parker, also making available Alhambra as the caterers. To Islamia, we say shukran for allowing your venue. To Maulana, a living legend, and this institute is also a testimony to that. May this institution, inshaAllah, Islamia, grow from strength to strength with both you, Maulana, as well as Shahzadullah. We wish you all of the best, inshaAllah. To the media that is present today, we see Farhad Umar of ITV here. Alhamdulillah, we say shukran for your presence. Samit Moos doing the recording. To the Voice of the Cape, we say shukran for your time spent here as well. And to Radio Al Ansar, that will also be airing the proceedings today, as well as Muslim Views, that we hope is going to write up a review on what has happened today. And also to our very own Butadiki, who is always ready to record. He's in fact a member of Jam'iyatul Qurra. Say shukran to you as well. To the other notable people who have contributed, we also want to say shukran to Mr. and Mrs. Bolas, Mr. and Mrs. Yusuf Patel, Mrs. Ibrahim Mohammed, as well as Yusuf Mohammed. Each and every item that you have received today has been donated by some people, most of them not wanting to be mentioned. I particularly make reference to the beautiful Jam'iyatul Qurra file that you have. Inside, we have left for you a recording of last year's Qira'at that was aired on Voice of the Cape and 786 during Ramadan. Have a pleasure of listening to the quality of the recitation of our product at Jam'iyatul Qurra. That was also donated. The posters that you see outside, all of them were donated. The catering was donated. So alhamdulillah, this organization is blessed, but it is blessed because of people like yourselves. I forgot to mention a special thanks also to the people from upcountry, particularly our honored friend and Hafiz Abu Bakr for leading the summation, but also always being there for Jam'iyatul Qurra. In fact, he's a product of Jam'iyatul Qurra because he studied under the tutelage of Sheikh Yusuf Bulli. And also thanking goes to Nizam Kala, who has also come up from up north. When we say shukran for that. Finally, I would like to thank each and every person sitting here. Having listened to the proceedings, the onus is now upon you. Add to the organization, become part of the or any other organization, but particularly today, become part of Jam'iyatul Qurra. Inside the folder, there is a biodata form. We would request that you fill it in and leave it at the reception desk where you registered this morning. We need to make contact with you on various fora for your expertise, because you have been invited here to bring along your expertise in thinking, in strategy, and in showing us the way. So please fill in that form and leave that form on the outside. But more honestly, we thank you for your presence here today. To the teachers and the shuyukh and the a'imma and the muallimat that have also come along, particularly from Jam'iyatul Qurra's Female Hafiz Institute, we say thank you to you also. And finally, to the organizing committee of Jam'iyatul Qurra who has put this together, shukran, under the guidance of Dr. Bulli. He's a slave driver and not only a dentist. He's put this program, and people like Dr. Lalkan and Anwar, and everybody who has helped to put this program together. Shukran. Jazakallah mulkhair. A small token of appreciation will be handed out by our Deputy President, Imam Ali. Bismillah.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين اللهم صل وسلم على سيدنا محمد في الأولين وصل وسلم على سيدنا محمد في الآخرين وصل وسلم على سيدنا محمد في كل وقت وحين وصل وسلم على سيدنا محمد حتى ترث الأرض ومن عليها وأنت خير الوارثين اللهم سلمنا وسلم ديننا ولا تسلك وقت النزع إيماننا ولا تسلط علينا بذنوبنا من لا يخافك ولا يرحمنا يا رب العالمين اللهم اشرح صدورنا بالقرآن وزين أخلاقنا بالقرآن ووسع أرزاقنا بالقرآن واختم لنا بالقرآن برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد النبي الأمي وعلى آله وصحبه وبارك وسلم وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد النبي الأمي وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين.
Shukran, everybody.
I know that you could easily take away everything you've given me, and I try to remember not to take anything for granted, 'cause I know that one day suddenly this will all come to an end. So my last wish is for you to be pleased with me. Allah, yeah Allah, guide me all the way to your Jannah. Yeah Allah, yeah Allah, don't let me go astray, 'cause I need you by my side. I wish to be close to you throughout my life. Yeah Allah, oh Allah, be with me all the way. I know that sometimes I do forget that my next breath could be the last. Forgive me, 'cause I can't thank you enough. Forgive me when I doubt your love. Now I pray for that day when all this stops and comes to an end. So my last wish is for you to be pleased with me. Allah, yeah Allah, guide me all the way to your Jannah. Yeah Allah, yeah Allah, don't let me go astray, 'cause I need you by my side. I wish to be close to you Jannah, Ya Allah, oh Allah. Don't let me go astray, 'cause I need you. Allah, Ya Allah, guide me all the way to your Jannah, Ya Allah, Ya Allah. Don't let me go astray, 'cause I need you by my side. I wish to be close, close to you throughout my life, Ya Allah, oh Allah. Be with me all the way, Allah, Ya Allah. Guide me all the way to your Jannah, Ya Allah, Ya Allah. Don't let me go astray, 'cause I need you by my side. I wish to be close, close to you throughout my life, Ya Allah, oh Allah. Be with me all the way, guide me all the way. Don't let me go astray. I pray to God, my heart, soul and body, every single day of my life. With every breath, I solemnly promise to try to live my life for you, oh Allah. You did revive my soul and shone your light into my heart. So pleasing you is now my only goal. Oh, I love you so, I love you so, I love you so. Now I know how it's like to have your precious love in my life. Now I know how it feels to finally be at peace inside. I wish that everybody knew how amazing it feels to love you. I wish that everyone could see how your love has set me free and made me strong. Oh Allah, I'm forever grateful to you. Whatever I say can never be enough. You gave me strength to overcome my uncertainties and stand firm against all the odds. You are the one who did revive my soul. You shone your light into my heart. So pleasing you is now my only goal. Oh, I love you so, I love you so, I love you so. Now I know how it's like to have your precious love in my life. Now I know how it feels to finally be at peace inside. I wish that everybody knew how amazing it feels to love you. I wish that everyone could see how your love has set me free and made me strong. My love, my life, my days, my nights, my wealth, my prayers are for you. My love, my life, my days, my nights, my wealth, my prayers are for you. And I swear that I will never put anyone or anything before you. My love, my life, my days, my nights, my wealth, my prayers are for you. Now I know how it's like to have your precious love in my life. Now I know how it feels to finally be at peace inside. I wish that everybody knew how amazing it feels to love you. I wish that everyone could see how your love has set me free and made me strong. My heart is so full of longing. I wish to be close to my beloved. I dream to walk in the streets of Medina and to quench the thirst of my spirit by visiting you, O Muhammad. Assalamu alayka ya Rasul Allah. Assalamu alayka ya Habibi ya Nabi Allah. Assalamu alayka ya Rasul Allah. Assalamu alayka ya Habibi ya Nabi Allah, ya Rasul Allah. I left all my troubles and